spoilers abound.
I'm Marjorie Egan. After you've gotten a chance to air your frustrations on the Celtics' comeback that wasn't, we'll pile on with Twenty Casey from NBC Sports Boston, where she thinks the C's can go from here, plus other, less devastating sports headlines. All that ahead on Boston Public.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Lawmakers are heading back to Washington to vote this week on the debt ceiling deal struck by President Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy last weekend. If approved, the debt ceiling deal would avoid an impending default and suspend the nation's borrowing limit until after the next presidential election. NPR's Susan Davis has more.
The agreement does not change how the government spends money, but does aim to put the brakes on it in the near term. The savings largely come from caps on discretionary spending over the next 2 fiscal years for almost everything but the military. The new Republican majority can also claim some political victories, with provisions to cut planned funding for the IRS, enact tougher work requirements for some adults to receive benefits like food stamps for a few years, and end the current pause on student loan repayments that began during the pandemic. Speaker McCarthy says most Republicans will support it. That promise will be tested with a planned vote on Wednesday. Susan Davis, NPR News, Washington.
The activity of volunteering to help others lowers the risk of mental and behavioral health problems in adolescents. That's according to a new study published in JAMA Network Open. As NPR's Ritu Chatterjee reports, the study also found that children and adolescents who volunteered were more likely to be in better physical health as well.
The researchers used data from the National Survey of Children's Health and found that adolescents who volunteered between 2019 and 2020 had a lower risk of anxiety. Volunteering was also associated with a lower risk of behavioral problems in children and teens. The study did not find a link between volunteering and depression, but the parents of kids who volunteered were more likely to report that their children were flourishing and in excellent or very good health. Previous research also shows that volunteering in adolescence is linked to a lower chance of having depression and risky behaviors in adulthood. Ritu Chatterjee, NPR News.
The government of China has launched 3 astronauts into orbit today, including 1 civilian. The trio is headed for the Chinese space station, where they will replace another trio of astronauts currently on board. NPR's John Ruwich reports this is all part of China's ambitious space program.
Their first manned space mission was in 2003. 20 years later, they now have an operational space station. They've gone from basically 1 crewed mission every 2 or 3 years to now they're doing 1 every 6 months to change crew at the space station. They've picked up the pace. They've sent a rover to Mars. They've sent various crafts to the moon, brought back moon rocks. And they just announced plans to put a Chinese person onto the surface of the moon by 2030.
NPR's John Ruwich reporting. Stocks are mixed on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrials are down 121 points. The Nasdaq is up 94. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. And a report from the Greater Boston Food Bank shows that many Massachusetts residents are going hungry now that the COVID-era assistance has been rolled back. According to the report, 1 in 3 adults in the state experience limited or uncertain access to adequate food, or what's called food insecurity, last year. The report also shows that more than a third of households said a child in their family has skipped a meal or several of the past 12 months due to a lack of food. Those numbers are higher among Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ households. State lawmakers are weighing a bill that would make it easier to transfer from one community college to another, such as 4Cs. The bill would simplify the process when transferring credits. Testimony is also expected on bills to related changes at colleges, including providing free menstrual products and requiring schools to report on the safety of students who study abroad. Today's the day that Horse Racing's Oversight Authority is holding an emergency summit with officials from Churchill Downs, Kentucky's Racing Commission, and the horse racing veterinary teams to review and analyze information on how and why 12 horses died in the past month at the home of the Kentucky Derby. 7 horses died from training or racing injuries at Churchill Downs leading up to the Kentucky Derby on May 6th, including 2 in the undercard. 2 other horses at the track had to be euthanized this past weekend after sustaining injuries at that track. What's going on there? Red Sox open a series with Cincinnati at friendly Fenway tonight. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Data IQ, a platform for everyday AI to help organizations make AI part of their daily business, designed to elevate people, teams, and companies. DATAIKU.com.
Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library in Copley Square. No reservations needed. You just show up and stay as long as you want or as little as you want. We are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Hello, Jim.
What's the admission price? I forgot.
It's
I
free.
always forgot that.
Free.
Thank you.
Free.
Appreciate it. It's free. Thank you. So after forcing a Game 7 in remarkable fashion, the Celtics ended their playoff run with a humiliating loss to the Heat last night at the TD Garden. It wasn't even close. They could have made history. Instead, they are history. And then there was the end of Succession. By the way, we're not doing spoiler alerts today. Get over it. If you didn't watch it last night, get over it. And the question is, what was more painful to watch? The Celtics demolition or the demolition of the Roy siblings? If you haven't watched it yet, as I said, no promises here to avoid spoilers, so be forewarned. 877-301-8970. And Marjorie is exactly right. Marjorie's side issue is, aren't you sick and tired of spoiler alerts for TV shows?
Yes.
Watch it or don't watch it, but get over it. 877-301-8970. Here is Marjorie's favorite commentator and mine, Charles Barkley, after the Celtics' humiliating loss with some choice words for the hometown team.
It was just frustrating that I was kind of like a shell of myself. It's tough to move.
I said, you created Miami for this one. They did a great job coming out, executing at the right time, and we didn't.
We failed. I failed. Man, we let the whole city down.
By the way, that was Charles Barkley doing an incredible imitation of Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and Jaylen Brown. We didn't mean to play that, but they were pretty sad also.
Oh, my God.
And speaking of that, should we not play a little bit of the end of Succession?
Well, yes, and you can tell us why you have been obsessed with this show, because you have.
Because it's one of the greatest shows, best scripts, best acting, best drama, dark comedy, maybe ever in television. Here's some thoroughly censored sound from last night's climactic end to Succession. Roy's sibling Shiv, my favorite, has just told her brother Ken that she can't bring herself to vote for him as CEO of their father's empire after what seemed like an inevitability. Here it is.
I love you. I love you, but I cannot f***ing stomach you.
This is f***ing disgusting. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
You're disgusting. You're f***ing heartless. What? It's f***ing nuts. It doesn't even make any sense. I'm the eldest boy. I am the eldest boy. Jill, don't do this.
Okay,
Jill, don't do
hold
this.
on a second.
Me?
Bring it, you piece of shit.
Get off me.
Jesus Christ. Are you kidding me?
Shiv, no, wait. Shiv, wait.
You.
F you, and that's the virtually the end. Now I have to be honest.
You should explain the basic premise of the show.
I'm not explaining anything. If
well,
you didn't watch
people
the
may
show,
not know.
Okay, so the father in this family that most people think is mirrors the Murdoch family.
Right.
He dies earlier in the season. Yes, he dies. If you haven't watched this season, again, move on to another show. And then the issue is, get the title? Succession.
That's right.
Who's going to succeed? There are 4 siblings. One is not even in the mix. The other 3 siblings, who's going to succeed? And it is a fabulous ending. I cannot tell why, though. I had to check Twitter for about an hour and a half last night until I decided how I felt about the ending. And then I decided about midnight, it's true, at about midnight last night, I loved every single second of it. But which was more painful to watch? The coming apart of the Roy family at the seams and the horrible ending where Shiv goes back to her pathetic, double-dealing husband, Tom, or the Celtics. You know, they didn't just lose. That was one of the most humiliating games I've ever seen.
You know, within seconds of the game starting and Tatum's turns his ankle, and you know that he's in pain, and you know that he's not going to be able to play for the rest of the night. And he played. He played, but he was not himself at all. It was just awful. And you say to yourself, what is up with this team that could be so great and just play that game last week? Remember Tatum scored 51 points in one of these series games?
It was a game 7.
And then tonight they get there, and when the game started, the excitement at the Garden was unbelievable. It was screaming from the rafters, and they just couldn't hit this out of a barn. It was so weird. And they kept shooting three-pointers when they kept missing the three-pointers. So you would think you might say to yourself, we should stop shooting the three-pointers.
You should be the coach. That's a very good idea.
Well, we have a little sound from the coach.
Well, we're going to play that later, but you can play it now if you want.
All right, I do want to play it now because after the game, this Joe Mazzulla, who is a man of few words, I think you can pull it off if you're Bill Belichick and you've been there for 20 years. I don't think you can pull it off, this kind of talk, if you are a new coach who's a very young coach. Anyway, here's sound of Celtics coach Joe Mazzulla responding to reporters in a post-interview last night, specifically focusing on this three-pointers.
Is this team too reliant on the three-point shot? Does that have to change?
No. Joe, obviously, in a situation like this, there's a tendency to kind of look back at missed opportunities. Do you look back with any regret at some of the things you could have done to win earlier rather than put yourself in this situation? No.
Okay, a man of few words, as you say.
Jim,
he's obviously petrified.
I just want to point out, when you miss all 10 three-pointers in the first quarter, you might reevaluate. Keep trying to shoot them over and over and over again. What's that, Jim?
No. 877-301-8970. I cannot tell a lie. I think this is obvious. Marjorie wants to talk about the Celtics. I want to talk about Succession.
Okay.
But since we're fairly friendly, the two of us, and we're partners on the radio, we decided we'd mix them both up and say which was more painful to watch. Now, Marjorie has been honest.
Peter's mixing them both together.
What is he saying?
Peter's text from Mystic, Connecticut.
What did he say?
The Succession finale had the same problem the entire series did. Everyone continued being the same disgraceful people they were when the series started. This does not make for great
I don't agree with
drama.
that at all.
You don't?
I mean, no, the question was who was going to be the winner, and the answer is virtually nobody was the winner, except what Shiv decided. Which is more painful, having your brother who is totally unqualified being in charge, or your weakling husband being in charge, and maybe your family, your immediate family, with your weakling husband, will give you some benefits.
I think she feels as though she can push the weakling husband around.
I think that may be true.
Probably
you
why
notice she didn't, when he held out his hand in one of the final scenes in the limousine, he puts his hand out. She doesn't really hold his hand.
She does not.
She lays her hand on top of his.
And she's pregnant with his baby. So
she
doesn't seem very enthusiastic about the father of her child. Let's put it that way. Anyway, how do you feel about the Celtics? How do you feel about Succession? I was devastated by the Celtics. I was so excited. I figured they were going to win for sure last night and make history. As Dan Chauncey says in his column, this may have been the most foul of all the stink bombs ever detonated by Boston teams in big games throughout the decades. This may have been the worst one of them all. I mean, they got booed last night.
I know.
In
their home court,
they get booed.
Game 7 after coming back from 0-3. 877-301-8970. And by the way, even if you're not sure how you feel about Succession, it took a lot of people years to figure out how they felt about The Sopranos ending. Call and embarrass yourself. It's fine. 877-301-8970. Now, Marjorie, by the way, I've watched every show with a passion.
I have not.
You have not watched every show, despite the fact you haven't watched every show.
I watched the ending.
What was your takeaway to the end? At the end, you have no takeaway.
The takeaways. If these are three. It's good to know that billionaires can be just as miserable as everybody else. That's why they're nasty. That's a totally dysfunctional family. They hate each other. They scream each other. They call each other horrible names.
A lot of C-word talk last night.
Yeah, a lot of that. Even though they ride around these big fancy helicopters and have these unbelievable dinners, and they go to these wonderful vacations, these places you can't even imagine, they're still miserable people. Terry on the road, thank you for calling.
Hey, Terry, what's up?
Hi there. I just want to say, guys, where is your compassion? These young men have worked so hard to get where they are. They made it to another level that other teams didn't make it to. Can't you celebrate the things that they've done and also criticize the things they didn't do?
Well, to quote Joe Mazzulla, the answer is no, Terry. We cannot celebrate anything We just wallow in misery.
But they didn't. But last year they made it. They should have made it to the finals this year, Terry. They were supposed to make it to the finals this year, and they didn't.
They're supposed to win this year.
Yeah. I mean, and they're unbelievable.
There are a lot of other teams that think that they have to make it to the finals,
Exactly.
and they didn't make it.
Well, not only that, Terry, what you should have
about
said,
next year?
Terry, can I make your argument even stronger? Marjorie and Jim, from what I hear on this radio show, your 5 children between you, Marjorie's got 3, I got 2, are older than, for example, Jason Tatum. Would you like your daughters, when they were 25, to have been savaged on the radio by low-life people like you? That's what you're trying to say, Terry, correct? Exactly.
Okay.
Terry, thank you for the call. She's right. We should show more
Well,
compassion.
the problem is that they are, by many counts, the most talented team out there, right? So if you're the most talented team out there, and you seem to go from 0 to 60 to 0 to 60 to 0 to 60 like that.
What does it even mean to be the most talented team out there?
I don't know.
You play a 7-game series,
Charles
the most
Barkley.
talented team
I
wins.
love to listen to Charles
He's
Barkley.
great.
He sits on the right-hand side, that TNT, that network. That's
Yeah,
where they have the
TNT.
post-game analysis by Shaquille O'Neal is on one end, looking like the size of 2 refrigerators.
He is huge.
He is huge. And then the other end is Charles
Barkley's
Barkley,
pretty big, too.
who is
He's not as
also
tall.
who is also very big. Charles Barkley was predicting they were going to win. He said they were going to win, even though they kept losing. First game, second game, third game. The idea of coming back with history. They interviewed Pedro Martinez about the dream team of the Red Sox.
They did? Oh, I didn't see that
Yes,
part.
he was sitting in this beautiful house in Miami. He lives in Miami, but he was rooting, of course, for the Celtics, having spent all that time in Boston. This was going to be a repeat of the Red Sox with the Yankees, and we were all excited, and it didn't happen, and now we're all devastated. 877-301-8970. A lot of people are blaming the coach. Judy from Jamaica playing. The Celtics needed a
He's
coach,
pathetic, obviously.
but they wound up unsuccessfully self-coaching and couldn't make the adjustments when the threes didn't fail.
By the
Didn't
way,
fall, excuse me.
Terry would probably say, why do you have to trash the coach? He's 34. He's doing the best he can. And whatever.
Well, you know,
I think he should get into real estate sales is what I'm thinking.
what did you tell me Brown's contract could potentially be?
Because he made second team All-NBA, he is entitled to he could be offered a salary of $295 million.
Right.
Wait a second. The richest salary in the history of the NBA.
You know what?
Despite the fact that he had 8 turnovers last night, which is pathetic.
Exactly. I don't mean to have no compassion, but if you're making $295 million, I think you should be able to hit at least 1 or 2 3-pointers all
Excellent
night
point
long.
on your part.
Maybe he did get 1 or 2.
Let's go to Robert and Lowell. You're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about which was more painful, the finale to the Celtics or the finale to Succession. Hey there, Robert.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning.
Whatever it
Good
is.
morning.
Hello, yeah.
It's great to talk to you, and like Jim, I've been obsessed with Succession.
Good.
But also with the Celtics this playoff season. But first of all, Succession, and I'm sort of a student of drama a little bit. Maybe Marjorie is too. But Roman, when he stands up in that fight scene, or afterwards and tells his brother we're all bullshit, or excuse my language.
Can't say that on the air. It's okay. We know what you mean, yeah.
He has. I think he's grasped something that certainly has eluded his brother. And so at the end, Roman, I think he's gotten a little clarity.
I agree.
Which I think is good. And but Kendall is just totally.
Well, wait a second.
Totally
Don't you
lost.
even
But
think
then again,
Roman was the only happy one? Even though they lost the company, he ends up at a bar having whatever it was, a martini, with sort of a wry smile on his face, don't you think?
Yes, but also nursing his wounds.
Nursing his wounds. That's a good point.
Yeah. So, and the Celtics, now, I know you and Marjorie, especially Marjorie, are never given to gaffes or little mistakes.
Never.
Oh, wow.
Never. But I would just say with the Celtics, who knows? They got suddenly a coach that no one ever expected.
Mm-hmm.
Different things went on. Last time, I mean, maybe it would have been better if he had taken Tatum out to see if the team regrouped.
Well, he did. He did in the first quarter. He
For
took him
about
out.
2 seconds.
No, but I mean, like, really, like,
Taking him out.
Just
Robert,
see
can
if
I
the
tell you
team could
something?
have really
When you made the comment before about Marjorie and I don't make any mistakes, we may make mistakes, but neither of us have ever turned over the ball 8 times in one show.
No. Here's the thing.
What?
Robert, if I were getting $295 million, I'd clean up the gaffes.
Yeah, you might do that.
What do you
Robert, that
think?
was an excellent call. Thank you for
Actually, I
calling.
probably couldn't clean up the gaffes, even if I was getting $295 million.
Oh, so what, is Terry having an impact on you? You feel bad because you're criticizing them now?
Well, no. I mean, listen, it's just it just seems, as I said a million times, when you have that much talent on that team, you could have 4 guys get 20-plus points the other night, and you can't. I mean, I blame the coaching.
Okay, fine. Now let me just say this.
Of course, Shaquille O'Neal said he didn't need a coach because he was such a great player.
He was half joking.
He didn't need a coach.
Well, let me just say what I said to you before the show. One of the reasons why I'm sort of with Terry and feel bad for these guys, because one, they're young for the most part,
They
except
are.
for like Al Horford. But beyond that, when you used to do a horrible column at the Herald,
Right.
what happened?
I wouldn't want to get up from my desk.
What would happen?
I'd feel horrible.
No, soon thereafter, you get to write another one.
Oh, that's right.
When we do a horrible radio show, which we occasionally do, what happens?
You get to do another one.
What happens to the Celtics?
They got to wait till next season to redeem
That
themselves.
is in many ways the worst part of the whole thing.
And you don't even know if they're going to stay together. I think they're going to Smart and Horford and Tatum and Brown will all be together. I don't know.
That's really incredible.
And Mr. White, who
Boy, that historical moment is gone like in a nanosecond, isn't it?
Phyllis in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Phyllis.
Hi, love the show. Calling all the time.
Thanks.
Coming up to see you guys next Tuesday. I hope you're there.
Okay, we'll try our best. Yeah.
This is my pet peeve. My husband and I argue about this all the time.
Go ahead.
Every single player on this team makes millions and millions of dollars.
Correct.
If you had any other job where you made millions and millions of dollars,
Yeah.
don't you think you have to perform? Don't you think somebody would say, gee, you got to practice a little more?
Yeah.
Gee, this doesn't make any sense.
Wait, what's your husband? Hey, Phyllis,
keep
your husband.
failing.
Whoa, Phyllis, your husband disagrees with that?
Yeah, well, they're under pressure, and, it's tough when you're standing there on the line.
Yeah.
What?
Exactly. Is your husband? Hey,
10,000 hours,
Phyllis.
kid.
Phyllis, is your husband in the car with you?
No, he's at work.
Oh,
but listen,
that's what he says,
it's the 10,000-hour rule. It's the 10,000-hour rule.
What's that?
Just keep standing there. The 10,000 hours, like outliers.
Yeah.
If you do anything for 10,000 hours, you should be able to do it perfectly.
Oh, right. That's right. Hey, Phyllis, that was an excellent call.
Right?
Tell your husband we're with you. Thank you very much for calling.
Now, Heather from Medford has an analysis
say?
of the meaning of the Succession show. Roman, he's the youngest brother.
Yeah.
His realization that all 3 of them are nothing was the point of the whole series.
Well, that's what they were saying. When that guy said, you're BS, I'm BS, everybody's BS. That was his point.
They don't know how to do anything well. Okay, we're debating which was worse. The Celtics pulling all the air out of the balloon or sucking out of the air out of the balloon.
Whatever
what do
that
they do?
is.
Pop the air out of the balloon.
I know what they
the
do.
Celtics disaster last night or the end of Succession. Which was worse? Which was more upsetting? I think clearly it was the Celtics, but Jim isn't sure. 877-301-8970. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at facebook.com/
Massachusetts, so that we can be prosperous and be in good health.
Your voice matters. GBH News 89.7. What matters to you?
Funding for our programs comes from you and M&M Skylights, offering a wide range of Velux skylight products, installation, and maintenance services to customers from Boston to Portland and surrounding areas. More information at mmskylights.com.
And Mystic Seaport Museum, currently presenting Oceanus, a new exhibit from contemporary artist Alexis Rockman, who the Chicago Tribune has called stunningly ambitious. Information at mysticseaport.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. If you just tune in, we're talking about a pair of endings. The Celtics lost last night, putting an end to their playoff run, and the series finale of Succession on Sunday. Which was harder to stomach? 877-301-8970. Now, Marjorie, you weren't as immersed in this as I was. I read every prediction from every, quote, expert about what was going to happen in the finale. You know who the only person who came close was? Sophie Kim is the editor-in-chief of something called Baby Names account. It's called Nameberry.
Okay.
And she, prior to the finale, goes and finds out what the origin of Tom's last name is. Tom has an odd last name, Wamsgans, and he's the guy who prevails, the weakling husband of Shiv. Here's her historical analysis of why he was named Wamsgans and what it means for the finale.
This is Bill Wambsgans, an MLB player during the early 20th century. He is remembered for one thing, and that is completing the only unassisted triple play in World Series history. He took out 3 players at once in what is essentially the finale of baseball. It's no coincidence that Tom shares a surname with Bill Wambsgans, so you have to wonder if Tom will complete an unassisted triple play and take out all 3 of the Roy siblings to become the leader of Waystar Royco in the Succession finale.
Which is exactly what happened. And the name is so odd. Don't you buy the notion that the writer, Jesse, whatever his name is,
very clever.
Picked the name because of that MLB player. 877-301-8970.
Here's Jean from Rhode Island.
What'd
She said, I see. Jim gets to talk about Succession when it pleases him, but considers the actual royals too paltry and low a subject to be worthy of his time.
That's correct.
That's a very good point, Jean.
Thank you, Jean.
I'm glad you texted it. Celia from the car, what do you think?
Hi, Celia.
Hey, guys. First, I just want to say I love you.
Thanks.
I've been listening to you in my car for years, and I think you're great.
Thanks.
So I've been watching Succession since the beginning.
You too.
And, I know. And those, the Roys, the 3 siblings anyway, you definitely love and hate all of them, right? And when it got to the ending, though, I have to say I was a little pleased. I was a little cringy at first, because it was a real cringe move. But, watching Shiv just brutalize Tom over the years, it was really hard to watch. And so when I saw him just do the checkmate, there was something really satisfying about it, to come from the bottom.
Celia.
Come out on the top.
Tom totally double-crossed his wife twice, siding with the elder Roy and then taking her job from the Swede, from Mattson, or whatever he was, the Swede, yeah. I mean, that's pretty horrible stuff, right? And then he tells her on the porch, last episode, she'll be a horrible mother and he hates her. I mean, come on.
Well, but in all fairness, I think he really did love her for years, and she just took every opportunity to just destroy him and destroy him. And,
marriage made in heaven.
It is questionable whether she'll be a good mother. I mean, she told Mattson, she's not going to take any maternity leave. She's just going to dive in and, go back to work.
Celia, I love you.
I mean,
I love this.
I love you too, Jim.
Celia, that is a great call. She's talking about whether Shiv is going to be a good mother in the future. Celia, that's beautiful.
I think that her nickname kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Shiv, as in the knife.
Yeah. A lot of people complain about their neighbors screaming. This is Luke from Worcester. The neighbors all screaming at the top of their lungs all night long. Did some sporting thing happen? Asked Luke.
Well, can I tell you the one thing where I think I'm with Terry, that earlier caller says we're not nice enough to these players? I don't think I would have booed if I was there.
No.
Would you have booed?
No. Well,
maybe I would have.
I figured the reason Tatum was bad because he sprained his ankle. But that really hurts.
Well, why was everybody else bad?
Well, I don't know.
Because Tatum sprained his ankle?
Because the coach didn't tell him to stop shooting the 3-pointers. That's
How do you
why.
feel when we come to the library and people are booing the last hour of our show? Does that trouble you at all?
Well, it's only happened 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, but it's been painful.
It's been very painful. When somebody said that, don't you guys have a show that's not so good every once in a while? Absolutely. Yeah. Who said that?
I
Marianne
think
from
I
Franklin.
just said it.
Yeah. Don't you have an off show now and then? Yes, we do, Marianne from
We have it more
Franklin.
than now or
Thank
then,
you for
actually.
reminding me.
Thank
We
you.
do. Quite a few times I feel that it was not quite what it should have been. Okay, let's go to Jogi. Is it Jogi from Rhode Island?
Hey, is it Jogi?
Yep, it's Jogi.
I
Hi,
like that
Jogi.
name. Hey, Jogi, what's up?
Yeah, listen, I love your show.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, listen, I just want to say this team does not have any discipline. I think it's time to break up the team.
I agree.
These guys are all superstars. They didn't play together. They didn't make any good decisions. They just panicked at the end. So I don't know. I've never seen a breakdown like this in my life with the Celtics team.
Well, but Jogi, I agree with you, but I think people who criticize you and me would say they did play together when Ime Udoka was the coach. And many people are saying in the last couple of days, if he was decent enough to be hired by the Houston team, why wasn't he decent enough to just be suspended for a month or two rather than being cut loose by the Celtics? And I have to say I'm not sympathetic to that position, But he did far better with this crew than this Missoula did, right?
Yeah, because, there's no discipline. I mean,
Correct.
Couldn't have called many timeout and say, look, what are you guys shooting threes for? You're not making them. You're 0 for 12. Stop shooting threes.
Yeah. By the way, that is the point that Marjorie made that is so true.
Stop
Why
it.
did he just say
go under
stop it?
Yeah, make the easy shots underneath, or the easier shots under the basket.
Jogi,
You could have
thanks.
accumulated all these 2-point baskets.
Appreciate
Instead,
it.
they kept doing it over and over and over again.
Were you screaming during the game?
No, I was
Did
not
you
screaming
boo
during-
them in the final quarter?
No, I did not
I
boo
think
them
you
in the
did.
final corner. I was just very sad about the whole thing. We're
Very
going to ask
sad.
Trenny why they didn't stop throwing the 2-pointers. But somebody just said a little while ago, the big question about succession is who is the coach that's going to succeed Joe Mazzulla at the Boston Celtics.
Oh, talk about that succession. You mean.
Yeah,
Well, I
talk
think
about
he's
that
probably going to get
succession.
fired. But the problem with firing him is it's sort of an admission on the part of the boss, Brad Stevens, that he screwed up. And, bosses don't like doing that. You know what
Well, I think I would think that cooler heads would prevail
Can
there.
we discuss
and say,
one other thing?
What?
What's your excuse for only watching 3 or 4 episodes of Succession?
Because I really
ever?
didn't like it.
What did you not like
Because
about
everybody was so dislikable.
So
Why am I
what?
watching
Did you like
the show?
Breaking Bad?
No.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. Every time I put on
Oh, 'cause the
turn on
violence.
Breaking Bad, someone's head was getting blown off
Yeah,
by a
a
shotgun.
lot of heads blown
A lot of heads blown off. And I just, there's enough problems in the world. But there was not a single redeemable character in the
That's a
entire
problem.
show. And so why do I care what happens to people? I didn't care what happened to any of them. Lynn in Bedford, thank you for
Hello,
calling.
Lynn.
Hey there. How are you?
We're good.
I love your show very much, and I'm calling to just weigh in. I love Succession.
So do
Succession is my favorite show. And Marjorie, watching shows about, nice, moral people is pretty boring.
That's right. I like to watch the show about the vet on PBS, the country vet.
Well, it's very true. They managed to absolutely, take all of the edge out of Tom Jones for PBS. So what can you do?
So what do you think of the finale,
but what I
Lynn?
wanted to say, pardon me?
What do you think of the finale?
The finale? I loved the finale. I thought it was the perfect ending
Me too.
to a perfect show. I mean, it destroyed me that Shiv had to get in that car and lay her hand onto Tom's hand. And I mean, but it was the only thing that could have happened. She is a woman in that world, and as she said at her father's funeral, it is very hard to be his daughter.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
I
point.
think she had a different path than both of her brothers, and she actually played it the only way she could and came out. I don't think she's going to be happy, but she came out with the only win she could have had.
That was great, Lynn. I
since
love
you
that
seem to
call.
know everything about Shiv, why did she marry this guy that she can't stand? That's what I
begin
want to
with.
know.
Well, I think because he glorified her, he loved her, he worshipped her, and she could hold power in that relationship.
That's a great
It's
point.
all about power, right?
Okay.
It's all about power.
It's all about power.
Hey, Lynn, that's a great analysis
one
of the
more
whole
thing?
Oh, sure.
Can I just, one more thing about the Roman
Sure.
smile at the end?
Yeah, at the bar.
It's not wry. It's wistful. And it's wistful because he's drinking a martini, which was Jerry's drink.
You're a
and
genius.
the thing that...
No,
well,
really.
No, that's it. I mean, I'm not a genius. Other people have said this too. But he's looking at that martini and I think thinking what could have been. And he's nothing also in Jerry's eyes, which is what really upsets me.
Jerry was the CEO for under Logan Roy,
Oh,
who
yes.
Roman fired, but had an affair with. Much older woman, but he clearly had a thing for her and with her. Lynn, that's a great analysis. Thanks for sharing that. I love that. That's great.
I don't remember. Was Jerry the what?
She's an older woman, blondish hair with glasses kind of thing.
Okay.
See, if you watch more than 4
and
episodes.
I saw the mother.
Mother's great.
And then I saw his
Harriet,
wife.
whatever her
Did
name
the wife disappear? What happened to the wife? She was on
He had
earlier.
a number of wives.
Oh, he had a number of
I
wives.
can't explain
Okay.
the whole damn series
All
to
right.
you, Marjorie.
Here's an idea from Becky.
What is it?
Maybe there could be a spin-off where the Roys buy the Celtics and the 3 Roys argue about who will be the head coach.
I love that.
And the giant Greg gets the job.
Do you know who Greg is? You have no
That
idea.
really lanky guy that was
Yeah.
the cousin that came in out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we thought he was going to take over. Didn't some
No,
people
we
think?
never did. There was a lot of speculation about whatever. So we have time for one more
One
quick
more
one.
quick one. Diego from Mission Hill. What do you think,
Hey, Diego, what's up?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
You know, what isn't mentioned very much is that is that the team that we were playing demonstrated right before our eyes what it is to be a team.
Great point. Great point.
They were coached well, but they worked as a unit consistently, and they performed way over their heads. And the Celtics didn't. So I like a good game, and I want to give them kudos. But they were an example of what we should be doing.
Beautiful call, Diego. That is exact. Occasionally the Celtics were passing the ball around, but it was too much one-on-one stuff too. Not only these three-pointers, Marjorie, but too much one-on-one basketball.
Okay, well, we're going to get the
Diego,
whole scoop on this in great detail
We
from
are.
Trenny Casey from NBC Sports Boston, who's up next to do the requiem for the Boston Celtics. She's next on 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library in Copley Square, and we are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.
PRI's The World is news.
By this point, we've got more security forces just to keep people back for their own safety.
The world is changing.
There's a huge number of young women veiled, but also wearing tight jeans and makeup.
The world is strange.
Posy Waller, which is a man inordinately fond of jam.
Join us on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Boston Foundation. Knowing it will take all of us to improve lives and strengthen communities, TBF partners with leaders and changemakers to close opportunity gaps, advance equity, and power a better Boston. Learn more at tbf.org. And Beacon Circle patrons Cynthia Strauss and Harry Shearer, proud to support GBH 89.7 and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by NBC Sports Boston anchor and reporter Trenny Casey. She's a BPR contributor. And what are we talking about during the brief break? Not sports, but talking about Succession. Trenny, it's good to see you.
I'm so glad that yesterday I watched the season finale, series finale of Succession before the Celtics game. I got home at 7:30. We watched it. I DVR'd the Celtics game and then watched that like a little delayed.
Delayed?
I watched it delayed.
Weren't you worried you're going to get texts from your coworker?
I did get some texts. It's fine. Like I still didn't know. Kind of similar to Succession. I didn't know. I knew kind of how it went because I saw an article in the New York Times when I went looking for an article for this show. Thanks a lot, guys. And so I saw a spoiler, so I kind of had an idea of what was going to happen. Same with the Celtics. Like, I knew that they had played like garbage because I kept getting these texts about how bad they looked in the first and second quarter, but I didn't know just how bad but I just went back and I watched it. It's kind of nice. You can like fast forward through the downtime. You can fast forward through the timeouts. And then I got caught up like with a minute and a half left of halftime. And then I was able to watch the second half.
Here's the last 20
live.
seconds of Game 7 to get us in the mood. Here it is, courtesy of TNT.
The last team to make it into the Eastern Conference playoffs, they lost only after they had won 3 straight games to start this series. So it was a Game 7. They stand eye to eye with history, and they did not blink. The Heat are going to the NBA Finals.
You know, that guy, Kevin Harlan, is a really, really good play-by-play guy. I think. He's really great voice and he doesn't overdo it. He's really talented.
He's a
so what do you think
football
of the
guy,
Celtics disaster?
I mean, to me, it wasn't unexpected. You know, all day yesterday, everybody kept saying, even I said, I was like, if they win Game 6, I think they are going to win Game 7. Like, especially the way Game 6 ended. Like, it was so fluky. Although it was a good basketball play. I do have to say, Derek White did everything that you're a coach to do. To, race to the basket, to get the rebound. Marcus Smart talked about after that Game 6 win that he wanted to get the ball, like release it, basically put up a shot much quicker than they did in that game against Philadelphia where they didn't call a timeout and they lost. And people thought they might lose the series there. And then Jason Tatum, of course, had that huge Game 6 and Game 7. And so they did all the right things, and I thought, man, that kind of way to lose for Miami must just stay with them.
I thought same thing.
So I thought, you know what? Then as the day went on, and everybody's talking about how the Celtics are going to blow out the Heat, I said to Phil Perry during a break yesterday, I go, watch them get blown out. I say, because they are the type of team that when everyone's telling them they're going to win and that they've got it, that's when they don't play hard. And they came out. I was shocked how flat they came out. right from the jump yesterday. And they actually really, early on in the game, I think they had like a 9-2 lead early on. They were shooting the ball not great, but they were okay. They were playing decent defense. Miami was struggling. They were forcing turnovers. And I was like, I knew kind of how it had gone. But I was like, boy, this wasn't as bad of a start as I expected. But every time Miami made a push, every time they punched them, they laid down on the mat and didn't get back up.
Ask your question for the coach.
Well, I mean, I am not a basketball aficionado
go.
by any stretch of the word, but even I know if you can't hit the three-pointers,
do something else?
Stop, just get underneath the basket and go in close and try to do it from there.
No,
and
Marjorie.
I know that I heard this coach afterwards when he was asked about this saying, oh, no, that's no problem. Clearly it was a problem. Why didn't he tell him to knock it off? Why did they keep doing it?
Because he has no control over them.
Well, not only that, that's what he's been preaching all year. Take at least 43-point attempts. He wanted 43-point attempts a night, which is fine when you're hitting.
Exactly.
I think I heard a stat this morning when the Celtics hit 39% of their three-pointers or more. They were like 7-1 in the postseason, and it was something even crazier, like 33-1 or 35-1 during the regular season. Well, that's fine when you're hitting 30, 40, 50% of them.
Yeah.
But when you are 0 for 12 on threes to start the game, or 1 for 12 or whatever they were, at some point you have to say, okay, guys,
you're just not on.
We need to go back to what worked in Game 6. And I know they ended up blowing a 9-point lead and needed a miracle at the end from Derek White. But when you look at Game 5 and Game 6, they didn't, especially Game 6, they didn't shoot the ball particularly well. They didn't shoot the three-pointer particularly well, but they took a ton of mid-range shots, and they were making those shots. They were driving the basket. They were drawing fouls. If something isn't working, there's just like, my main issue with Joe Mazzulla and this team is that there's no adjustments made.
Yeah.
Like one thing that always just, I think stood out to me during the Patriots' like real run of success when they had Tom Brady, they could be down at halftime. They could be down in the third quarter, but they go in the locker room, say at halftime, and they come out, and Bill Belichick made adjustments that everything that was working for a defense or an offense before didn't work anymore in the second half. Like he's always been like a master of adjustments. There were so few made in game with this team, and I don't know if they're going to fire Joe Mazzulla. The word on the street is that that's kind of difficult to do. That would be their fourth, I guess. Brad Stevens, that'd be their fourth head coach in the last 5 years or so. Apparently, Brad Stevens kind of sees Joe Mazzulla as the next Eric Spoelstra, that he's his protege, he's this genius, and that if they just would have put like older coaches around him, maybe things would have been okay. I will say this about Joe Mazzulla. I was very much on the fire Joe Mazzulla hype train after they were down 3-0 to the Miami Heat. I will say, at least he made some adjustments and listened to people around him and did some learning, which is a lot more than you can say for his team.
But didn't he say something like they know how to do it? I mean, didn't he say that himself? They know how to play, something like that. It was like bizarre.
Well, that was after, but he did then make the necessary adjustments. So he did say that after it was, again, I believe it was Game 5.
Didn't call timeouts.
Didn't call timeout. I believe it was Game 5 against Philadelphia.
Wait. If it turns out the consensus of every basketball expert is you have the best players of any
which
team
was
in the
Barkley's
league, which is all
shtick.
everybody said it, including the great Charles Barkley, and you fail so miserably, you lose your job. Period. I don't
he blamed the coach.
I don't. It's not ill will on my part. It's clear this guy is not up to it.
I would. The only thing I would say is, and I tend to agree with you. I have not personally, and I said this on the show last week when they were down 3-0. When they took the interim tag off of him, I said on my air, I hate this move. He hasn't proved anything. Just because you win a bunch of games in the first half of the season doesn't mean you've accomplished anything. Like, you've done a nice job of steadying the ship. You should get some credit for that, but you haven't accomplished anything. The goal here isn't to win the first half and coach the All-Star game and win the All-Star game. The goal is, and they see the credit of the players last night, they said this season's a failure. It is an abject failure. Everything lined up for you to win the NBA title this year. Milwaukee got knocked out early, and Giannis Antetokounmpo was hurt. The Sixers folded once again, and you were facing the 8th seed. That Jimmy Butler, I mean, yeah, he had 28 points, and he had, I actually don't think he should have been the
should have been Caleb Martin.
It should have been Caleb Martin.
Is unbelievable.
Right, and I was talking to one of my producers through text last night. He's like, can we really say the Celtics were the most talented team at the end of the day? Like, their bench players outplayed the Celtics bench players.
Well, can I tell you what I think the determinative issue on Missoula is? We rarely play sound twice, but this is such an embarrassing interview. Post-game, just briefly, here are a couple of critical questions from Missoula and his total inability to answer either honestly. Here it is.
Is this team too reliant on the three-point shot? Does that have to change?
No. Joe, obviously, in a situation like this, there's a tendency to kind of look back at missed opportunities. Do you look back with any regret at some of the things you could have done to win earlier rather than put yourself in this situation? No.
I mean, that's worse than Belichick on his worst day.
Yeah, this is one of my
embarrassing
issues with him. He refuses to take responsibility, and I think that his team then refuses to take responsibility. I watched part of postgame last night, but quite honestly, I'm tired. I never stay up past 10 o'clock, and I've had to stay up till like 11 or 11:30 a lot lately. And so I was rewatching post this morning, and Jason Tatum was asked a question about looking back. And do you look back and try to learn lessons about what happened early? When you fell behind 3 games to the 8th seed. He's like, no, we don't like to look back. And I was like, no, wrong answer. The answer is, we do need to go look back and look at ourselves and wonder why we were in that hole in the first place. But it's like they don't ever think they do anything wrong. I will say, you said, they have all this talent, they did all these things. They have failed to reach the pinnacle under 3 coaches. They failed to do it under Brad Stevens. They failed to do it under Ime Udoka. And now they have failed to do it under Joe Mazzulla. Now, the path lined up better this year than it did for them. And at least under Ime Udoka, they got to the finals. And they had a lead. They had a lead. They were up 2-1 before Golden State. Like, listen, Seth Curry, it kind of felt like they had one more coming for him.
I have a question.
That's difficult. And it was your first time in the finals, right? Like, I will look at that and give you that as a building block. But this should not be a building block. They should not have lost to the Miami Heat.
So I have a question. When Tatum sprained his ankle, as he clearly did in the first few seconds of the game, what do they do about that? They don't tape it up. Do they give him a shot? Do they give him 800 milligrams of Advil?
Are they allowed to give him a shot? I can't remember if you're allowed to do that.
I don't know if I don't have the answer. It's not that I don't know.
Because he was clearly in a lot of pain.
But they didn't take him. I think... Again, I watched it sort of.
They didn't take him out.
They did not take him off the court. They took him out of the game for a few minutes, and they were working on his ankle. So if they did anything, it would have been at halftime in the dressing room. But I will say this. Jimmy Butler, if you notice, I believe it was either in the second or the third quarter, he came up limping.
Yeah.
He was hobbled a little bit, and he drove the lane and he created shots, and Jason Tatum still grabbed 11 rebounds and dished out 4 assists. Like, he was still active. He certainly didn't have any, he only scored 14 points, but if you're the best team and you're the most talented team, Jason Tatum shouldn't have to score 14 points. It's not like Jimmy Butler went out there and scored 56. It's so, to me, it's a mentality. It is a mentality of being like front runners. I texted somebody yesterday, John Tomasi, during the game, and I said they're fraudulent front runners. When they have a 10, 15, 20-point lead, then they're awesome. They're moving the ball, they're doing all this stuff, but they cannot play good basketball unless they have a comfortable lead. Otherwise, they just fall into bad habits, and to me, that's a personnel thing. And the Celtics are going to have to take a long, hard look at that roster, at the coach, and figure out who you're going to put around Jason, because I do think Jason Tatum is a really good player. Who are you going to put around to make him the best player that he can be? How are you going to win a title? Because obviously this is not working.
Okay, so let's switch sports to an incredibly dramatic story. This, in the women's seed of the French Open, a player from Belarus who just won the Australian Open beats a player from Ukraine. At the end of the match, the player from Ukraine, who had great sympathy, understandably, from the crowd at the beginning of the match, is booed when she refuses to shake the hand of the player from Belarus. And here's an ESPN clip of Marta Kostyuk, is that how you say her name? The Ukrainian, responding to a reporter's question about the boos after she wouldn't shake the Russians' opponent, a hand.
I don't know. I want to see people react to it in 10 years when the war is over. I think they will not feel really nice about what they did.
And the reason there's a controversy is because this player from Belarus did say nobody supports the war.
Yeah, she was outspoken about not supporting it.
However, the player from Ukraine said the one thing that the Belarusian, I think that's how you say it, player would not say, who she wanted to win the war. And I have to say, regardless, the fact that these fans in France booed the player from Ukraine because she decided as a moral, personal decision, she would not shake the hand of a woman who comes from the country whose leader said, we will enter the war if Putin asks us, and is a staging ground for Russian troops in the war. I thought the fans disgraced themselves.
Yeah,
actually.
I don't like it. And to me, that just speaks to the privilege that so many of us who did not live through a war, World War I or World War II, don't have any idea of how it can tear apart a country. Like, we are lucky enough to not know what it's like to have our cities bombed out. We are lucky enough. I mean, I know the French obviously see photos from World War II.
Well, their grandparents probably lived through some horrors.
Right, their grandparents did, or maybe great-grandparents. But they didn't. When you don't experience something, I think it makes it easy to have a callousness towards it, to look at pictures maybe from Kyiv and say, oh, well, people are still in the subways and they're going to work, and look, things look normal, and why can't you? This woman was nice enough to say that she doesn't support the war. Why can't you just shake her hand? Not understanding, like, we don't know. I don't know that this tennis player doesn't have brothers or uncles or cousins or a spouse or boyfriend or something who is fighting in this war. We don't know if she lost people that she loved in this war. I think that
she's lost tons of country people,
yes,
whether they're her family
personal,
or not.
Right, family or not. To me, it just speaks to the ignorance of so many people and the unwillingness to ever understand what it might be like to go through so much trauma and to feel like you need to, like, how many of the Ukrainians feel like they need to flee. I feel the same way when people complain about, and I know that the immigration crisis is very complicated, but I always say to people, they're like, well, why do they leave? And I'm like, well, if your family was being hounded by gangs every single day, you would leave too. You would do anything to save your family.
What do you think of the booing?
And I think that's what she's doing. I think she's not shaking the hand because she would do anything. She feels so much pain and sorrow that even someone who might not be directly involved feels directly involved.
Well, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Yes,
I have that exact same philosophy. What do you think of them booing this young woman?
I am not going to criticize anybody from Ukraine that's seen the horror of what they've endured. The whole place, or not the whole place, but considerable portions of the whole place absolutely wiped out in the atrocities in the war.
And for nothing other than bordering a country that somebody else wants,
I get it.
Yeah.
And why are these, by the way, maybe I know a lot of people who think sports should be above this, international competition. Why? I know they can't, the teams from Russia and Belarus can't compete in these international events. Why is there not pressure on the countries by banning their individual athletes? I know people say, oh, it's a great sacrifice. They're in their 20s, they've practiced their whole lives. Well, the sacrifice pales next to, as you say, the sacrifice that the average Ukrainian is making. Let's put more pressure on these countries. You don't think the president of Belarus is going to celebrate or did celebrate when this woman won the Australian Open? It was a source of great national pride. Same if she's seeded number 2 in France. If she wins the French Open, she's going to be celebrated as a national hero, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little more torn on that because that is where I do think, like, this, Sabalenka, right?
Sabalenka, something like that,
who is the Belarusian tennis player. Like, I don't even know if she lives in Belarus anymore. I don't know what her ties. There is a part of me that feels like when it's somebody's livelihood and they're not representing their country, now the Olympics to me is a different story. The World Cup, something where you're representing your nation, but tennis is an individual sport. You're representing yourself. It is your livelihood, your money. That to me is a little more complicated in taking something like that away. Because I don't know if we knew that it would change things. Like I suppose, but it hasn't changed anything in terms of taking teams away. So I don't know why it would change their approach to the war.
I think it's small suffering as compared to the great suffering, and might it work? Possibly. Might it not work? Maybe it won't. But I think it'd do it. We're talking to Trenny Casey.
So more and more horses are dying from injuries at Churchill Downs. There's a total of 12.
There are 2 more, right?
Yeah, 2 more
Just past
died
week.
from injuries at Churchill Downs, and the total is 12.
We should say this is where the Kentucky Derby
the racetrack
takes
where the
place.
Kentucky Derby takes place. So I don't know what to make of this.
I do wonder at what point does horse racing step in and do and do something like they did at the racetrack in California where the 30 horses died. I mean, at some point, don't you have to take a deeper look at what's going on at Churchill Downs? Why is this happening? What are the practices? What are you giving the horses? What kind of medications are you giving them? And I know that they do drug testing and all of these different things. It's why Bob Baffert's horses, for the most part, aren't competing anymore. But the safety of these horses, and they're not, I mean, at the end of the day, as much as I like the Kentucky Derby and the pomp and the circumstances fun, I would be fine if they said this is so cruel, we're not going to do it anymore. But it's too big of a business, right? It's too many very wealthy people with too much influence. So
Well, if they're not outlawing
happen.
boxing, they're not going to outlaw horse racing.
Also they used to talk about how the horses were too young and they should wait a while, but one of these horses that died was 7. So most of the ones that are in the Kentucky Derby are 3.
And I also don't know there are times when just in regular training or regular riding, something happens and a horse hurts themselves, right? Like that's different though than a pattern of, horses getting sick and injured to the point where they need to be euthanized.
Yeah.
So to me, there needs to be a greater. I know it's half the number of horses that died at the racetrack in California, which received sanctions, but something needs to be done about this. And I don't know how. I don't know enough about horse racing, quite honestly. Even as I was reading articles, it was a little convoluted in my head about what they were talking about. But it just seems like for our financial gain and entertainment, and I'm not I'm a meat eater and stuff. I'm not like a vegan or anything.
I don't think you're a horse eater.
Yeah, but I do feel that they're running these horses out there for their own financial gain and for the public's financial gain and entertainment. They don't deserve to suffer and die because of that. So they need better oversight in place. Unless it kind of reminds me of soccer, right? Meaning the governing body cares more about the money and the influence than they do
like the NFL,
about,
like everything else.
Yes.
We got to go.
Okay, we've
Nice
been
to see you,
speaking with
Trenny.
NBC Sports Boston anchor and reporter Trenny Casey. She's also a Boston Public Radio contributor. Up next, we're going to have a transit panel. We're going to be joined by Stacey Thompson and Jim Aloisi to talk about the never-ending saga, what's going wrong at the MBTA, will it ever be fixed, and a bunch of other transit issues. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
In Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. Chef Lydia Bastianich travels across the U.S. to hear stories about the heritage of first, second, and third-generation Americans. Catch the season premiere of Lydia Celebrates America, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Arun Roth, host of GBH's All Things Considered, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston.
Days ahead of June's Tony Awards. We'll get his take on all 3, plus Georgia O'Keeffe at the Museum of Modern Art. Then CNN's John King zooms in to talk about the debt ceiling deal, what's in it, what's not, and if it's got the votes to save the economy from collapse. We'll end the show by taking your calls and texts. Would you get on a plane if they asked you to step on a scale first? No. All that ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are urging lawmakers in Congress to support their debt ceiling agreement. NPR's Windsor Johnston says the House Rules Committee takes up the 99-page bill today, ahead of a vote by the full House tomorrow night.
Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are trying to push this through both chambers of Congress before June 5th, projected to be the earliest the U.S. could run out of money to pay its bills. Leaders in both parties are working to convince enough of their members to vote for the deal, which contains provisions that lawmakers on each side of the aisle don't support. The agreement would raise the debt ceiling for the next 2 years and cap some government spending. It also includes tougher requirements for some federal assistance programs and regulatory changes to speed up the permitting process for energy projects. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
Former Silicon Valley executive Elizabeth Holmes is expected to surrender to federal authorities in Texas today. NPR's Bobby Allen reports Holmes is to begin serving an 11-year prison sentence for defrauding investors through her failed blood testing company, Theranos.
Elizabeth Holmes is expected to serve her sentence at a minimum security women's prison camp in Bryan, Texas, about 100 miles northwest of Houston. That's where she grew up and where some of her family still lives. Holmes can still try to appeal her conviction, but she will do so while incarcerated. An appeals court denied her attempt to remain free while she appeals. A jury last year convicted Holmes of fraud and conspiracy for lying to investors about the capabilities of Theranos' blood testing technology, which barely worked at all. Holmes' story was the subject of a best-selling book, a documentary, and an Emmy-winning Hulu miniseries. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
Some of the Russian capital's most well-known districts, including site of the president's home, have come under attack, what may be Ukraine's biggest ever drone strike. President Vladimir Putin says Moscow's air defenses are being bolstered against what he calls terrorist activity from Ukraine, which Russia invaded last year. NPR's Charles Maines has more on what Russia's defense ministry has shared with the public.
The defense ministry says 8 drones were spotted over the city and its surrounding areas earlier this morning. Even as media reports have that number much higher. Whatever the case, it seems some drones were intercepted by air defense systems. There's online witness video that NPR can't confirm, but appear to show a Russian anti-aircraft fire destroying 2 drones mid-flight. Several other drones apparently got caught in trees and telephone wires as they approached the city. And then Moscow officials say at least 3 hit residential buildings.
NPR's Charles Maines reporting. U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 123 points at 32,969. The Nasdaq is up 77 at 13,051. The S&P is up 4. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Federal Transit Administration is giving the MBTA until next week to come up with a new plan to ensure worker safety. That's after rejecting the T's initial plan that was submitted earlier this month. We have more from GBH's Bob C.
The original plan to protect track workers was in response to an immediate action letter from the FTA after 4 near-miss incidents involving crews working on MBTA rights-of-way. That plan called for fixes that would be made as late as next year. But the FTA said that wasn't enough and is now giving the T until June 5th to come up with a new safety plan that can be implemented within 60 days. The feds say that if the T fails to comply, right-of-way access could be prohibited, causing further delays to desperately needed repairs. Bob C., GBH News, 89.7.
Smoke from wildfires in Nova Scotia will blanket eastern Massachusetts today. According to the National Weather Service, the smoke will only be about 25 feet from the surface of the ground in a wide area from Boston south to Cape Cod. Lower amounts of smoke will be seen west of Framingham. Forecasters say Nova Scotia is experiencing high heat and favorable fire conditions, and as of yesterday, more than 25,000 acres were on fire, forcing about 16,000 residents to evacuate. That smoke should clear out of the region by this evening, but if you do see it get hazy out there, that is the reason why. It is 67 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Bank of America, offering access to resources and digital tools designed to help local to global companies make moves for their businesses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/bankingforbusiness.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, hour number 2. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library as we do every Tuesday and every Friday, and we are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now at the BPL by Jim Eloisi and Stacey Thompson. Jim is the former Secretary of Transportation in Massachusetts, a member of the Transit Matters Board, and contributor to Commonwealth magazine. Stacey, who's going to brag about being from Minnesota in a minute, I'm not going to tell you why, is executive director of the Livable Streets Alliance right here in Massachusetts, by the way. Jim and Stacey, nice to see you both.
Thanks for having us. Always nice to be here on a slow news day.
Yeah, slow news day, that's right. Well, Jim and I got into a big fight before the show because I wanted to start with this ridiculous bus driver situation.
You're supposed to say, so how did you get here?
Oh, God.
What's wrong with you?
How did you get here? All the way from Minnesota, Stacey.
I biked, and it was so fast because I didn't get stuck in congestion.
Okay, you biked here today.
How long did it take you to get from JP or your office?
I biked from Alston, and it took me 11 minutes.
Wow, okay. How about you, Jim Eloisi?
I took the red line, to the green line, and then I'm here.
Any fires or anything?
No fires, no incidents. A really nice ride. I encourage people.
Why don't you say to me,
yes,
how long did it take me to drive to Malden last week in the afternoon when it said on whatever, Waze or something, it'd be 22 minutes. How long did it take?
From where to Malden?
Right here to
from here to Malden?
Malden, yes.
About an hour?
Hour and 28 minutes. Well, there you go.
We have too many people driving.
Excellent point, by the way. It's one of the things we're going to talk about.
Okay, I'm going to start with the bus drivers.
You do whatever you want to do.
Because this just so incensed me. I remember back in September, there was a story about how the T couldn't hire enough bus drivers. Lo and behold, Lawrence could hire them, other cities could hire them, everybody else seemed to be able to hire them. We couldn't seem to hire them, not only because we didn't pay them any money, but because they had to work part-time between 2 and 4 months and 3 to 6 months. This was back in September. And what have they done? They've shut down bus lines and people having to wait longer. So now, in May, the new guy, I think Philip Eng, he decides that they're going to hire people full time, but they're still not going to pay him any money. I just don't know how this place survives.
Why are you two looking at each other?
Well, because I don't know. I mean, I think I'm on the show monthly.
Yeah, I think you are.
We can, if they record these things, you can go back 4 months at least.
And
every time this comes up, I say, Stacey says, you can't hire people if you're going to start part-time. This is no secret. We've been calling for this for literally months, right? And you have to pay people competitive wages. And so I applaud. I think.
Yeah, just
But they're not paying competitive wages.
No, they're not.
Even now.
I agree, but they started moving people to full-time is good. Paying them better will be better. But we're in a 3%, unemployment economy.
This is the gang that couldn't shoot straight, if you ask me. And we'll go on to the other safety issues in just a second. But
yeah, so
go
I
ahead.
mean, this does require negotiation with the Carmen's Union, so it's not something the T can decide overnight.
Oh yeah, they're going to turn down a wage increase. They're going to say, I am sorry,
but
if you're not negotiating fairly, we will not take a $6 an hour pay raise. Next point.
I'm about to agree with you. Just to put this in context, now that a new bus operator could work full-time, that would make them, a starting wage would get them $43,000 a year. If you're a bus operator in Chicago starting out, you're going to make $60,000 a year, and the cost of living is significantly lower in Chicago.
You're going to make more money in Lawrence.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, this
one of the poorest cities in the state.
This seems like a no-brainer, but the largest portion of staff salaries in the operating budget goes to bus operators. There are just a huge number of people they need to hire. And so my guess is that this is a budgetary conversation, and that leads back up to the governor and the legislature, making sure they have enough resources to pay those.
Well, wait a
bus drivers.
second. If you're going to attack the legislature, I read in the Globe today, they've already done 10 laws in 5 months. Now, maybe the fewest ever, but what do you expect? And they rename plazas or something, one of those 10 laws. Now, something allegedly happened in Minnesota that you want to brag about. What is this again?
This is where my Minnesota roots come out. So there's a very similar context in the state of Minnesota in that they've not had Democrats in the House, the Senate, and as governor for about a decade. They finally got their trifecta. They have a razor-thin margin in the Senate by 1 vote, and they just passed. They've been passing a tranche of legislation. They've been going rapid speed. But the thing they did last week was pass a comprehensive transportation bill that increases the gas tax, puts a fee on delivery things, and it also pays for rail between the Twin Cities and Duluth, which for context would build the connection from Boston to Worcester 3 times over. So Minnesota is doing this.
So when are we going to do that? I forget. When's that going to
hopefully next week.
We have a legislature that for a long, long time has been closely tied to timidity. And, I mean, this is their comfort zone. They don't like to be... Change is something that doesn't come easily in Massachusetts.
But when they read that, we all read the story in the Globe about this, what is it called, the International Transport Forum or something that talked about all the elements. Was this out of Leipzig where they met, which is a city in Germany, roughly the same size as us, 600,000 people. Downtown is virtually shut down to automobile traffic. And who wrote this? Taylor
Dolvin. Yeah.
Okay, wrote this piece. Basically, ticking off all the things that this International Transport Forum said we should be doing, virtually none of which we are doing. Is that an overstatement?
No, it's not. One of our doctoral students, actually, at MIT, wrote Chapter 5 of that report on livable cities. It's a really good report, and it's not that hard to get through. We're just not getting it right. And one would have hoped that in the aftermath of the pandemic, we would have realized the importance of moving to sustainability, improving the urban streetscape, and giving people wider sidewalks, dedicated cycling lanes, bus lanes, excuse me, not abandoning trolley electric buses, right? But we're not doing any of those things. And I think, it's the longer we stay entrenched in the ways of the past, the harder it's going to be to do what is inevitable, which is we have to figure out how to build a transportation network that's sustainable for the 21st century. All of these investments that Stacey and I keep talking about are not investments that can be deferred much longer.
Yeah, but Jim Aloisi, so I'm sitting home, and I'm one of the, I think it's 60% of the people who go to work in my car by myself.
Right.
And I wake up and I read the lead story in the Globe is that the federal, whatever the hell it's called, says, try again. Your response, the FDA said, try again. Your response to our safety criticism, which I think was only the second they've ever done or some such thing, is inadequate, try again. So am I going to say, hey, I've got a great idea. I think I'm going to ride that T to work tomorrow. No, I'm not.
No, I understand that. And look, I think from the governor down, we need to have a stronger commitment in Massachusetts to mode shifting people, to getting 10, 15% of those people you're talking about is stop driving. But you can't do that unless you give them really viable alternatives, right? And that's where we're failing. We're not giving the viable alternatives. The FTA letter that is sort of hot in the news today is unfortunate. However, I would say this. If the Federal Highway Administration was treating the Massachusetts highway system the same way the FTA is treating the T, we'd be shutting every highway in the state down. So I ask people to have some
perspective. You think this FTA is overreacting?
I do. I think that, look, safety is important. This incident, the series of incidents that occurred in March, there were 3 what they called near misses. A near miss is not a good thing, but it's not an injury. It's not any kind of harm.
It's a near miss.
It's a near miss. You don't want those. But you don't put the riders at risk by threatening to basically shut the system down if the T can't do the impossible. And what do I mean by that? If you read the letter, basically saying to them, we need a short-term answer from you of how you're going to staff up. Oh, and by the way, if that means you have to go outside and hire embedded contractors, you can do that. The T needs the time to build internal capacity. This hiring of embedded contractors, maybe it needs to be a part of a short-term triage. As a long-term play, this is a disastrous thing for this agency.
What are embedded contractors?
Embedded contractors, I think, means outsourcing it to people who are going to charge a lot of money to do what they should be able, right? Because, again, in a 3% unemployment economy, I guarantee you there are not people lining up in queue waiting to get jobs at the MBTA.
Yeah, but let me just get back to the point you made before that Marjorie was making with Governor Healy the other day, and the point that Stacey was responding to. You don't need a lot of brain power to figure out if you're making full-time $43,000 a year where you can make more, as Marty says, in Lawrence or wherever else. Maybe we have to raise the wages, not after we have a commission for 6 months, but maybe this afternoon call the president of the Carmen's Union, say we'd like to raise your wages. When can we have a meeting to do? I mean, it's so obvious to me as a layperson, what are the immediate things that would really, strike a chord kind of thing?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So coming back to Jim's example, these are highly skilled jobs. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that the T responded originally in the early days of GM Eng's role. Since then, we have a new chair of the MBTA board who's very skilled.
Tom Glenn.
Tom Glenn.
By the way.
We have a new safety officer. And so I think we have a much better chance of this group of folks sitting down and actually getting the response to the FTA right. But what actually matters are the people that are highly skilled and highly trained on the ground. And you don't just quickly apply. Even if you double the salary, you need the people with the right skills and expertise to do this kind of work.
Well, we've known about the bus drivers thing for almost a year. So it would seem you could train bus drivers in a year to drive a bus. And it also seems, look, I'm not dumping on you guys. This isn't your...
I think you should dump on them.
But our fault. The more you read about this, and then you read about how they have a new T-board. Why do they need a new T-board? Because the last T-board seemed like it was a big joke. There was that big meeting about safety concerns, and nobody asked anything.
Well, it was right after the guy, Mr. Leyland, was killed.
Was killed by the red line.
And not one member of the subcommittee on the T asked one single question
So
of the
it's
staff.
almost like I said before, it's like the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Now, maybe the problem is the legislature because of they're not caring enough or not wanting to spend enough money. Or if you're in Sturbridge, you don't want to fix the T or something. But the story, and I know there were a couple of people that did live closer, but the Andrea Estes story in the Globe, most of the people did live far away. They didn't all, but most of them did. I mean, come on.
Well, this is not an easy thing to solve, getting the T back to running a first-rate service. But you can solve it incrementally, which is where I think we're heading, right? It's just maybe not fast enough for people like me, Stacy, or
the riders,
or the average T rider.
So is
right?
it the legislature that needs to be pushed, or
The
what?
The legislature has never really, in my judgment, understood or appreciated the need to attack the chronic issue of the T's insufficient budgets, operating and capital. They still haven't done that. We still face a potential operating shortfall later this year, unless the legislature acts. Now, Tom Glenn has said, I think, publicly, that he's talking about or thinking about shifting the cost of paratransit away from the T and shifting the cost of some of the big dig debt. That would free up some money. That would be a useful thing for the legislature to get its act together and actually do sooner than later. But we need a larger, more systemic source of new revenue. Fare revenue before the pandemic was 1/3 of the whole operating budget, right? And 1/3 of that third was commuter rail fares. Now, post-pandemic, we know that ridership is sort of plateaued for good reason, right? Part of it is pandemic effects, part of it is people working differently, part of it is, frankly, annoyance or disgust at what's happened since the Orange Line shutdown. That ridership's not recovering to 100% pre-pandemic anytime soon. That means fare revenues are not recovering either. The legislature needs to act to fill the gap equitably and sustainably. There are ways to do it. Some of it is shifting costs, some of it is actually providing the T with the resources. That's step number one for the T to be able to have the capacity to hire the professionals Stacey was talking about and do the things that need to happen to turn this ship around.
Do you think Healy and the administration have the sense of urgency that's necessary?
I mean, I think they're starting to feel the heat. I was vocal in saying that I wished that the governor had replaced the board members. So you mentioned we have a new board, we have elected people. We had everyone that was on that board was appointed by Charlie Baker, right? So we finally have the appointments that we were asking the governor for, and we are seeing
well, except
the impacts
no Wu,
of that.
no seat
Not
for
yet.
Boston.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But so that's a good start. I do think there could be more urgency, but I also, in addition to the funding, one role that the legislature has to play is actually sorting out who oversees safety in the long term in this state. So when the FTA responded to us, they didn't just say, DPU, get your act together. They said, it's not a good idea that the governor appoints everyone at the DPU, everyone at the T, all the board members. You need an independent body, right? They said that loud and clear. The way that gets created is through the legislature. The governor's doing what she can. There is a bill that was heard, and it's sitting in committee right now. The legislature could take action on this and start giving some support to the team.
Can the Minnesota legislature pass a law that changes the safety laws in Massachusetts?
Well, I mean, maybe. Let's ask them. Because
we're talking to Stacey Thompson and Jim Aloisi, our transit panel.
I said this before we went on the air. People don't pay enough attention to the legislature. I mean, it is incredible now that we have the House Speaker and the Senate President, no term limits. Story in the Globe today about Matt Stout about how they haven't done anything, basically. It's the worst ever in terms of their performance. Everything is always stuck in committee, but nobody gets on their legislator about it. You kind of got to not only call your legislator, write to your legislature, email your legislator, and call their offices to let people know that you care. But people don't pay attention, I don't think.
Well, no, and I think that I think that there is a fair amount of fatigue in the public, because I often say public transit should feel like a sewer system. And what I mean by that is you don't think about it. We invest in it, we make sure there are the right resources, and when it functions, it is so good that it is not top of mind. And so I don't think people should have to reach out to their legislator to make sure that a bus or a train isn't on fire, right? Like, they should have a sense of urgency on their own without their constituents reaching out and asking them to fix these problems.
But there's no urgency on Beacon Hill, is what I'm saying.
No.
There is zero. I mean, it is a minus urgency. They'll just sit there forever.
So, Jim Aloisi, let's talk about marketing this for a second. With the ridership down, and again, as I said, 60% of their cars, it seems to me that even if they did all the things you're talking about, the implications of those change behaviors are not going to be felt overnight.
No.
So, I don't mean this as a joke. I know it's going to sound like a joke. Why aren't they doing things like serving free coffee? I'm serious, totally serious about this. Why aren't they doing things that commercial businesses do to lure some of us in? A crowded restaurant in Cambridge now serves you a glass of wine on the street if the cops aren't looking while you're waiting in a line. That makes you much more likely to go.
Where are we serving
I
the
think
free
they're breaking
coffee?
the law, so I don't want to say that.
Where are we serving free coffee? On the tea?
Yeah, why can't they?
Would you want to drink a cup of coffee?
Absolutely, I would. There seems to be not only no sense of urgency, no creativity, no brilliant marketing like there is on lots of other things to say get back on the tree, no bonuses, even though you're concerned about fares, which I understand. It seems to me one of the ways you get them back on is to give them some sort of a break, which will cause more deficit problems in the short run, so that they're on the line, so there's more revenue in the long run. There's almost like there's almost no campaign, it seems to me.
I appreciate it. I think it's, first of all, I think some of the folks who work at the T who are in charge of that sort of external messaging have been doing a much better job at it. But what you're saying is really, I think, Jim, it's about managing to the rider and thinking about finding ways not just to attract riders, but to make current riders feel better about
Absolutely
the experience.
Right. You're saying it better than I. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
I don't disagree with it. There could be corporate promotions that do it. The T doesn't have the money to afford to buy the coffee, right? But if Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts want to participate in that sort of thing, I think it's a good idea. I think we need to give people hope. I think.
How about one day? How about wait before you finish that thought?
Give people hope. That's the best line of the day.
Where every corporation, every local government within the T says this is take the T to work day.
Sure.
And there are now, of course, it could end up being a Twitter Spaces kind of thing, like another disaster. But hopefully, they'd be smarter than Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis, so that everybody has a festive feeling day. There is. What are you laughing about?
No.
By the way, you and I used to run down the hall on our own radio station if there was a free piece of ham down the hall.
I don't even know if there's still a Dunkin' Donuts in Park Street. There always used to be a Dunkin' Donuts in Park Street. And I always used to think to myself, I don't know if I'd want a donut that had been sitting there next to
Okay, I would want a donut. Go ahead, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I don't know.
I don't know where we were.
I don't know where we were either. You were saying I was not wrong to say that maybe there's got to be better marketing.
I think there's a larger messaging that everyone needs to think about. I tie it back. There was an article in the Globe a day or two ago, and I'm blanking out on the fellow who wrote it, about we're getting our narrative wrong about the city. Do you remember this?
No.
It was in the Globe a few
Well, whatever.
days ago.
Describe it. We'll figure it out.
Scott Kirstner.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But it made me think, there's this narrative out there, a city's dead, a city's dying. I don't know. Look around. This city's not dying.
No.
It's different. That's the D word. The city is different. The T needs to also be different. It needs to run more efficiently and better. It needs to be more responsive to how people are living in this post-pandemic moment, right? I think the mayor of Boston actually gets this. If you see how she's leading in a lot of ways with dealing with
the safe surge thing,
safe surge, right?
Yep. Safer.
This is leadership that's kind of fearless, and I don't know why people aren't looking at it as a model for how everyone else should be behaving.
Could you
right?
describe, Stacey, because I'm sure it matters to you, the safe surge thing, which we're going to bring up. Explain what she's doing and what you think of it.
Yes. So it's the City of Boston Safety Surge.
Safety, I'm sorry.
And it is basically a comprehensive overhaul looking at the hundreds of miles of city streets, analyzing them based on zones, and then strategically looking at the data, looking where they have the most sort of crashes or problems, and putting in things like speed bumps. And so it's like it's very basic, very simple stuff, but they're going from an old model where a neighborhood would have to ask for an intervention to just saying, we're going to do 10 a year, we're going to do it based on the data, we're going to do it equitably, and we're going to move fast. They also updated their signal policy, which sounds super geeky.
Yeah.
It's like how they make decisions to time traffic signals. But it's going to do things like give pedestrians a little more time to get across the street, which sounds small, but that can really improve a person's ability, especially older folks, people with kids, make it a lot safer for them. So it's simple, but to Jim's point, people sometimes freak out about a speed bump, and the city's just saying, we're doing it. It's based on the data, it's based on safety.
Yeah, okay.
What do you mean, yeah, okay?
Well, no,
Is that not impressive to you?
I think it's very impressive. Well, I think Mayor Wu's very impressive on a lot of fronts.
But she's also doing, correct me if I'm wrong.
Didn't you ask for a speed bump on your street over there in Cambridge,
I can't believe
Jim?
you're bringing
Jim
this
asked for a speed bump on his street.
Did you get one?
He was a city councilor.
I can't believe you brought this up. I told this in
Just
confidence to
an example
Marjorie.
of how much he was disliked on the city council.
That I'm the only local elected official in American history who, while in office, asked for a speed bump and didn't get it. That is really unheard of. But what we didn't do, even for those streets that did get a speed bump, that I think Wu is doing, which is brilliant, and simple but brilliant, is one of the things that happens in Cambridge. You get a speed bump and you just drive one street over, still double the speed limit. My understanding is what Wu's doing, maybe that's a zone thing you're talking about. If it's one speed bump, then maybe adjoining streets are going to have a speed bump too.
For context, I think there's something like 200 miles of streets in Boston. Something like 60% of those streets would qualify under this program. So they're not going to do it overnight, but they're taking a citywide approach.
There's a great map showing this on Streets blog. You can go look at it, and it's really impressive. But,
So before we talk to you again, do you think they're going to raise the salaries for the people that drive the buses so they can actually hire some people, or do you think this may go on for another year?
Is this a wager or what?
We're taking bets?
I'm just curious because you think also too, a lot of people that drive the bus, college kids without cars, people that can't afford cars, or maybe it's like they're screwing the people that can least afford it.
Let me put out a couple of tests that I think before we get here next, maybe the T should try to pass. Right?
Okay.
Shutting down the blue line for extensive periods after 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. They're hurting a lot of riders in that area because of it. But they're promising better blue line service when the Sumner Tunnel, everyone who can listen, is closing all the time permanently for 2 months this summer.
When is it closed? What's it closing?
July and August.
July and August.
Let's see how that works. That's a test. Second test. There's this little thing called the Construction Investment Plan, the CIP, that was put out for public comment in April. Haven't heard much about it from the T. A lot of people, myself included, didn't like some of it because it was very much a same old Charlie Baker era document. It didn't reflect the red-blue connector. It didn't reflect regional rail.
That's Jim Aloise's pen. He's got the connector.
Would you like a pen?
It's very nice, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you
Chiefly
very much.
Block over here.
Would you like a pen?
I would love a pen. Do you mind, Stacey, handing it to me?
Very attractive.
It says connect, and it's patriotic. It's red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
But, joking aside, connecting the red and blue line means that if you're at MIT or you're at Biotech in Kendall and you have a flight at Logan and you're traveling light, you don't have to take an Uber or a Lyft over to Logan, right? Because now you have a very easy connection. If you're a single mother with a sick kid in Revere or East Boston, you can get a one-seat ride to Mass General instead of walking the kid a block and a half away in the rain, right? There are valid and good reasons to do things like this. So the second test is the CIP that they put out in draft form going to be amended to reflect the advocacy input that was received in April. So let's see what happens with the Blue Line. Let's see what happens with the CIP, and then we'll know whether we have business as usual or whether we have change in the mix.
Well, we're going to say you should lay out some benchmarks too, so we can do it next week. But before we do, which do you think is going to happen first, connecting the red and blue line or giving each rider a jetpack? Which do you think the team will
I'll
do
go
first?
with red to blue.
Red to blue,
Committed to
okay.
red to blue.
Do you want to lay a few foundational kinds of things out there? We can judge you or the T by next
Imagine
month.
people flying over us with jetpacks.
Yeah,
That's going to happen first. let me
Listen,
tell you.
I would not put it past someone to suggest jetpacks, gondolas, flying saucers to get us around. No. I mean, I agree with Jim, but I think that there are, again, smaller nuts and bolts things that we can do in the short term, right? So there's the capital improvement plan that is for the biggies, right? And we have to be able to look toward the future. But what I think about is that we need to actually just fix the HR department at the T so that we can hire the team that will build that project. And so if we don't do that now, it's boring stuff, right? But people will put their applications in at the T and wait 3 months to hear back. And so this is the kind of thing, if you're going to
3 months?
Get the right people into the system to drive a bus, to be a dispatcher.
How long does it take you to train somebody to drive a bus who's
I
not
was
a
just
bus
asking
driver?
that question
Oh, you did?
earlier.
I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think
It's
it
a
takes
very
year.
difficult job.
I know it is.
It's a few months.
A few months. Okay.
Well, and if you have to get your, I could be mistaken on this, Jim, but I believe for some folks they need to get their CDL license first, and then so they have to get a specific type of licensure, and you're allowed to be hired without that licensure first. So you get the license, and then you go through the training, which is very comprehensive.
Good.
And some the MBTA's bus riders drivers are some of the safest in the country. So their training is excellent, but it takes time.
Okay, so these are the two things we're going to judge the T by. My addition, and you can add one on if you want, is whether they're serving coffee on the red line.
But just
Coffee
think
is not
about it.
allowed on the train, Jim.
It's not?
No.
It isn't. Well, then they got to change that rule too. Come on.
But you really have to think about this. That they are surprised they can't hire drivers when they were hiring people to work part-time for the first 2 to 4 months.
Well, they fixed that. They fixed it.
After almost a year.
Yeah, it's true.
So what did they expect was going to happen with that ridiculous rule? What are you
I think
supposed to do?
that's a trick question,
You can't.
by the way.
You're supposed to survive on $20,000 a year. I
I think if they listened to this segment every month,
they would,
and implemented the few
Even
things that we
10% of
say,
it, right.
things could be a lot different.
Okay.
Right.
Could you report on the jetpack proposal
Do
too when you get
we
back?
have time for people
No,
with
we're
using
done.
their cell phones too
No,
much
we're
on the
not.
phone?
Next time.
I mean, in the car?
No, we're not.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I'm venting at you guys. And really, you're not running the T.
They're not the problem.
They're not running the T.
It's
You're
to my
not.
point, Marjorie. Too many people are distracted driving. And
Yes.
if the Federal Highway Administration took the same attitude toward highways, 439 people died on our roads last year in Massachusetts.
Fewer in Boston than the year before, but more statewide.
More statewide.
more statewide.
But if we're treating it the same way as FTA is treating the T, we'd be shutting every highway down in Massachusetts.
And the federal government
right?
could be taking steps to get screens out of vehicles, to make cell phone companies sort of have automatic triggers that won't allow you to use your phone, like these, in the same way they mandated
they have
the
that.
seatbelt.
That's right. When you put your foot on the gas and it
but
goes over X miles an hour, it kills
I think
your phone.
a good example is that seatbelts for a long time were optional in cars until the federal government required it. I think for this, we can talk about the state legislature, but we really need the feds to step up.
We do. Yeah.
Can I ask one more thing for the next month? They've passed 10 laws this year in 5 months. You think we'll hit 12 by next month when you're with us, or is that too bold?
I'm good for 12 as long as they're, naming something.
And you know what's great to think about? If you like it now, get used to it, because since they have no term limits, we could have the same two people, Spilka and Mariano, running this thing until we're all dead.
Marjorie, 2 words for you.
What?
Jetpack. I'm telling you. That's the hope.
Okay. We've been speaking.
That's our next pledge, by the way.
Okay,
The Jim and Marjorie
jetpack.
GBH
I remember
jetpack.
reading that in Time magazine when I was a
$10
little
month.
girl. You're all going to have jetpacks. That's what I would
It'll
have.
have to be an electric jetpack.
Of course
Yes,
it would be.
of course.
What do you think?
Okay.
Nice to see you both.
I've been
Thank
speaking
you
with
so
our
much.
transit panel, Jim Aloisi and Stacy Thompson. Jim is former Massachusetts Transportation Secretary, member of the Transit Matters Board, and contributor to Commonwealth Magazine. Stacy is Executive Director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Thank you both for coming in.
Good to see you
taking
both.
this abuse from
Thanks
me
for
and
a button.
Jim. Coming up, we're going to talk with Charlie Sennett, who is just back from a reporting trip to Ukraine. We're going to talk to him about the situation on the ground over there, as well as the re-election of the Turkish President Erdogan, and what's happening with this attack on Moscow. that may or may not have come from Ukraine. He's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
While the country as a whole explores the idea of reparations, a group in Amherst is working to create the first such program in Massachusetts for that city's Black residents. One important factor they're deciding is eligibility.
I believe it should be direct descendants of slaves that are from here.
But we're not completely excluding reparative projects that might involve the wider community of people of African descent.
I'm Soraya Wintersmith. I'll have that story on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Mystic Seaport Museum, currently presenting Oceanus, a new exhibit from contemporary artist Alexis Rockman, who the Chicago Tribune has called stunningly ambitious. Information at mysticseaport.org. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season of 7 evenings featuring Jane Fonda, Van Jones, former Ukraine Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. bostonspeakers.org.
Whoops. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I forgot who I was and where I was for a second. I am Jim What do you mean,
No, I just wondered. It's okay.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
I'm Jim Browdy, and she is Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by GBH News analyst Charlie Sennett, co-founder and editor-in-chief of Ground Truth Project, just back from Ukraine, which we'll discuss. But before we do, I hope it doesn't cheapen the conversation. What do you think of the finale of Succession?
I didn't watch it, Jim. You kidding?
Wait, you didn't watch it?
I have no time for those guys. I'm with Marjorie.
Oh, okay. You can't stand them.
I can't stand them.
Stand them. Why do I care?
Why would we want to spend time with
Exactly.
miserable, horrible, despicable people when we could watch a noble warrior team trying to do its best?
That's right.
They're our team.
You can do both, by the way.
Well, okay. Well, then I'll try. I have a family of sons who love the show. And they don't understand why I hate it. And I clearly am part of some strange generational divide here. And you fall on the young,
even though we're sort of in the same
side.
generation. But I'll forgive you. It's nice to see you. Welcome home, Charlie.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, really, I really enjoyed the show. And I think the Celtics had a tough night, but they had one hell of a dramatic season.
They did?
Well, it was dramatic.
Cardiac season.
That's
but
true.
a great season.
Cardiac season.
Okay, disgraceful.
So tell us about what you saw.
Yeah.
Why you were there.
So I was there because we had 2 conferences. So there was a conference in Bucha. Remember, Bucha was the city that was hit so hard early in the war, where these terrible atrocities were carried out by Russian troops.
Wasn't that where the Brilliant Frontline was done? One of the best front lines ever.
Great.
Yeah.
Crime Scene, PBS Frontline documentary, really
Brilliant.
captures just what happened in Bucha and what will be the process for prosecuting war crimes. And that is huge. The other thing was just this conference in Bucha called the First Annual Journalism Conference of Bucha. And I was so thrilled to be there with our Report for the World partners, Ukrainskia Pravda. I've talked a lot about that newsroom on the show through the last year. They're amazing. They convened with the Media Development Foundation of Ukraine to pull together 200 local journalists from every corner of Ukraine. And it was really to talk about how the crisis in local news in Ukraine is an urgent problem. They need eyes and ears on the ground to know what's going on, to inform people on the war. But they also need those reporters in place for the future of the country, so that when hundreds of billions of dollars
For
in aid comes
reconstruction.
in, that there will be accountability reporting. They need it because They're going to be the local eyes and ears that document war crimes. And so it just was such a meaningful moment. We talk a lot about the local news crisis in America and how it's impacted our democracy. There, the stakes are so high, but it's very parallel in terms of what's happened with the collapse of local news and what it means.
A couple of things. First of all, we've asked this before, and I forget. How do you get from Boston to Bucha?
Good question. You fly to Warsaw, Poland, and in my case, you fly on Lot Air, which loses luggage every time. And you go to Warsaw, and you get on a train from Warsaw.
Like, did Biden do a variation on that? Didn't he take Air Force One to Warsaw?
Air Force One to Warsaw, and then it's unclear whether he rode the train like the rest of us or he actually had a military convoy coming in over the border.
So what did you do?
And I don't know the answer.
After Warsaw?
I went and got on the train like everyone else, and the train is a sleeper, and you're on that train for about 22 hours.
Oh my God.
And you plunge through all of Ukraine until you get to Kyiv. And it's dramatic going in because you're of course going into the war, you're going into this place where just get kind of bracing yourself for what you're going to see. But I think coming out is much harder because you leave behind a country that you know is just so brave and resilient and courageous and where so much help is needed. And your passengers on the way out tend to be families with, broken suitcases and kids who are exhausted and they're fleeing for their lives in many cases. And you're able to go car by car and hear the story of people from Ukraine and why they're coming out. Soldiers who are wounded, who are going out for medical treatment, or families who have just been torn apart by the war.
Why is a journalism conference it wasn't just a couple hundred local inside Ukraine journalists, but a bunch of international journalists like you and New York Times, Washington Post. Why is that not a target for the Russians?
We didn't advertise it that much.
I assume you don't need to advertise it for them to know.
I think the probably more valued targets are the military targets, but I do think it's a good point. I think everything that's done in Ukraine is done with a sense of keeping it under the radar, literally. And so they didn't publish the location of the conference until you accepted the invitation. You'd been vetted as a person who's coming, and then you plugged it in and you found out where it was. And it really was quite a moment to hear colleagues, really talented colleagues who've covered this war from the very beginning, from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, from the Wall Street Journal, from the BBC, sharing what they see as reporters and being so humble in deference to the Ukrainian journalists, because reporting on a war in your own country is of a different caliber altogether. And I think all of us who were there as Western journalists were recognizing that. Our work with Report for the World is what brought me there, and our work with Ground Truth in general. But I think it was really a global event and an important one, and they're going to have another one next year. So.
We're talking to Charlie Sennett just back from this journalist conference in Bucha in Ukraine.
So, Charlie, Russia is blaming Ukraine for this damage done to buildings in Moscow in this drone attack over there. I didn't know, maybe I should have, that Ukraine, well, they're denying it, but is Ukraine attacking Moscow now?
I don't want to cop out on this one, but I've been stuck in traffic for the last hour and a half, and I'm hearing this news in real time, and I would say this is one I'd want to wait and evaluate more carefully. I don't think we have all the facts in on what happened with these strikes. These are drone strikes, according to the New York Times, that hit in Moscow, and look, we have to wait and see what the targets were, who really is responsible, and there's so much more to learn. But I feel like the last thing we want to do is start okaying the idea that because one country commits a war crime in the indiscriminate attack on civilians, to say now our allies, who we're so proud to be part of supporting, again, this illegal invasion of their country, that it's okay for them to do the same thing. It's not. But to make that judgment, to say that, I say it respectfully as someone who understands there are rules of engagement in war, there are international war crimes, but the biggest thing you need is the ground truth. You need to know what happened there, what was the real story, and we don't have that yet.
Well, one thing that you will comment on that's not illegal and is perfectly proper is this counteroffensive. I don't really understand what it means. I mean, I understand you go on the offensive in an attempt to reclaim some territory that the Russians have taken, But the planes that we promised, which are huge, Biden promised a couple of weeks ago at the G7, they haven't been supplied yet. So what's real
and why they
in this
keep
counteroffensive?
advertising it? You know, we're going to have this huge counteroffensive. We're going to have this huge counteroffensive. Why do you do that?
Well, I think one of the things I learned in Ukraine is just how exhausted the people are. I mean, you ask, like, what's it feel like? What's it look like? Kyiv is, again, this surreal city where it feels like you're not at war. There are restaurants where you have to make reservations. There are people out and about in the streets. There's the celebrations that they have.
Even though there were 59 missiles aimed at Kyiv just the other day,
right.
58 of which they intercepted, but 59 missiles from the Russians directed at Kyiv.
And when I was there, we had incoming every night. But every night the Patriots took them out. And
so you hear sirens? Is that what you hear?
You hear sirens. You hear this incredible thud as the Patriot batteries go up and out.
Wow.
And you sort of have to make a determination. Do you go into the bomb shelter as the air raid sirens are ordering you to? Or do you do what the entire population of Kyiv does, which is try to get some sleep, check on your kids, make sure you're... And it's every day they've been dealing with this for weeks and weeks and months, and they're exhausted. So that was the most horrific night, was just the other night, and I was home by then. But that was a bad one. That was worse. Remember when I came home and we had 40 missile strikes inside of all of Ukraine in one day, and I was there for that. That was in December, I believe. And this was the worst day since then, but this one was markedly different in that all of them were in Kyiv. And that was unusual, and some of them were daytime strikes. So these were intended to do two things. One, scare the hell out of the people of Ukraine, and two, to keep those Patriot batteries right where they are in Kyiv. They want to pin them down, protecting the city of Kyiv, and not let Kyiv get comfortable enough to think, let's take these very successful, sophisticated, Massachusetts-designed Patriot batteries and move them in to protect troops in the field further up to the front.
What's the research, Charlie, on, and I'm sure there's a ton of this, which I'm not familiar with. What happens to the survivors? Let's assume the best case scenario, which even if it happens is a long way off, and Ukraine repels the Russians in some fashion. And if it happens, it's going to be a few years out. Those people in Kyiv and other cities, but in Kyiv trying to live their life as normally as possible, raise their kids as normally as possible. They obviously can't, despite their... What's the research show about what's the impact on the lives after on people who've survived that kind of thing? Yeah.
So a big part of the conference in Bucha was about trauma.
Oh, really?
Both how journalists are experiencing trauma, and you got to recognize that and practice self-care, but also how do you report on trauma? How do you share the story of your country really caught in the trauma of this war? The key thing, I think, is never to underestimate it. You may have a street that didn't get hit with a single missile, but if you've lived in fear for months,
sure, that's exactly right.
You inherit the strains and the stresses of that. And I know, this is, sadly, I've covered way too much war. I never want to call myself a war correspondent, but I've covered conflict as a journalist. And the trauma is real, and the trauma lingers, and the trauma is something you have to deal with. So that was another thing we were working with the journalists on, was how to think about that from those of us who'd actually done it before, although that really important distinction. I've covered wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. When it's your own country, when your kids are asleep, right there in the middle of that war, that takes it to a new level.
Well, you covered 9/11, did you not?
I did.
When you were working for the Daily News, was it then?
First for the Globe. So when 9/11 happened, I was with the Boston Globe and was right there on the ground by September 19th. When we lived in Israel, in Jerusalem, and covered the Intifada, we had our children who were just really toddlers, and we were there for the bus bombings. And I have a taste of what it is like to have a family caught in a conflict where people are being killed every day. And it's a taste of it, though, and I was able to leave. And so my heart is out to the Ukrainians for whom it's their home. And I know I say this every time, but their resiliency is amazing. They're putting a lot of faith in the counteroffensive. So just to circle back to your question, like, what is it? What does it mean? The counteroffensive is going to be focused mostly in the south, is what we're hearing. So this is all analysis and reading everything I can and talking to journalists who are covering it on the ground. I don't want to pretend that I am like a military analyst who's up to date on exactly where this thing is headed. But I do know in general terms, this counteroffensive is going to be focused in the south. The goal would be to try to push Russia back significantly in the areas they have captured, potentially including Crimea. And that is, of course, the prize. Russia sees it as its own. It invaded Crimea in 2014. For Ukrainians, that's when this war began, 2014, not a year ago when we all watched that big convoy lining up trying to get into Kyiv. That battle for Crimea is huge. It's a long shot to think that the Ukrainian forces, even with the most successful counteroffensive they could imagine, could take it. But I do think they're going to try to concentrate around it and on it and try to push Russia back till we get to some form of a possibility of a discussions for how do we get a ceasefire and how do we work toward ending the conflict.
That's Charlie Senate, just back from Ukraine. He's from the Ground Truth Project.
You know, Charlie, a couple of minutes ago you mentioned how people are at restaurants, you have to make reservations and stuff. So the kids are in school too, right?
They are, yeah.
So when you see these shots of Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine on TV, you see a lot of just rubble. But so there's rubble here, there's a building that's intact there. I mean, describe what it's like.
So in Kyiv, you'd have to look hard to find rubble.
Okay.
It's there. Warehouses on the outskirts of the city, things along the river, some, apartment buildings that have been hit recently. There was photographs of an apartment building and all the rubble on the street, and it's there. But it's a big city, and you'd have to look hard for it. When you drive through the country, when you leave Kyiv and you start driving through, and remember I had that long drive to Kharkiv.
Yes.
And that trip, and on this trip getting out to Bucha, you see mile after mile of communities that have had they've just been beaten up. There is rubble. There are apartment complexes with holes punched in them. I think I described that place in a town called Boryanka, which is right next to Bucha, which the buildings, the way they've been hit by the missiles, it's like the whole front of the building is shorn off and it looks like a dollhouse.
Oh.
You see into all the rooms. And you see, a table with literally still coffee cups on it, or you see a chair in a room with a book on a table on the side, and it's like it all didn't get moved, and no one can get up there because the buildings aren't stable. So it's this sort of frozen exhibit of a moment in time when that missile struck and sheared the face off of the building, and they're very dangerous and precarious buildings. And the reconstruction that's going to happen is going to be hundreds of billions of dollars. This will be the biggest investment in rebuilding after a war since the Marshall Plan. And this is an enormous moment for Ukraine to rebuild its country, but also to rebuild it in new ways. And one of the things we were talking to the local journalists about is how do we help train them? Like, how could we work with them? How could we support them? We have this amazing global director on our team called Preeti Nalu, who heads up Report for the World. Our team does trainings on everything. So a question we're asking ourselves now as a team is, like, what would it look like if we were there to help train them on municipal reporting, on accountability reporting, on these aid contracts, so that you have local reporters doing what we do, like go out and make sure the money's being spent the way it was intended to be spent. Make sure it's a success. That could be an incredible investment of the donor community in having accountability of this enormous and very generous aid effort that's going on. If we don't have people watching the store, how are we going to know it's working?
Can I ask a naive question, Charlie? Is the reconstruction going to begin as the war continues?
Excellent question. And the answer is yes. In many places, it's already underway. Bucha, I couldn't believe it. Bucha is that street where we saw those bodies strewn.
If you haven't seen the Frontline thing, what's it called again?
Crime Scene.
Crime Scene with that main drag.
I hope I have that name right. I believe I do. Maybe we can check.
Jamie or Joey's checking.
PBS, Frontline,
it was
our
brilliant.
Amazing colleagues at Frontline. That piece on Bucha is, I think it's the best thing that's been done on the war to date. So the streets of Bucha, which really were worse than rubble, they were running with blood. I mean,
there's bodies lying everywhere. The cars driving down the road.
458 people were killed. Many of them with their hands tied behind their back. So these were executions. There was allegations and now prosecutions of rape, systematic rape of women. There was a cleansing, big quotes, operation going on to try to find out who's in that town, and the Russian forces were selecting people house by house. This is the dark the darkest of the darkness of war as Russia is carrying it out in an illegal invasion. And there in Bucha, the streets are swept clean. The place is starting to get back to normal. There's brand new housing development along that street.
It's called Crime Scene Bucha, you're right. Yeah,
okay.
That's what it's called, yeah.
And this purposefulness of doing that in the face of war is something you see in the most resilient and tough countries that go through a war. And Ukraine, I've just never seen anything like it. It's pretty amazing. And I want to tell you one sort of thrilling, small, little, tiny moment, but I loved it. We were at the Bucha conference. We're talking about trauma. We're talking about war. We're talking about these huge issues of the fateful hour for this country. And the local journalists are giving us insights into what it's like in this corner of the country and that corner of the country. And the Bucha, let's see, maybe get the name right. The Bucha City is the local website, news website. And the Bucha City editor was there with me, and he said, look, man, I can't talk anymore. I got to go. There's a water main break, and I got to go cover it up on Main Street. And so I went, I loved it, and I went with him, and I just started walking with him, and he's like trying to figure out, so it's a 10-inch main, how did it crack? And, you know, that's something, as a local reporter, I've done that reporting, you've done that reporting.
Yeah.
Water main out, wash water running down the
Yeah.
streets. God willing, someday Ukraine's going to get back to caring about a water main break, and a local journalist is going to be there to report on it. And that's kind of a local news reporter's hope for the future of Ukraine.
You know, we're almost out of time, Charlie, but one quick question. The people that have lost their homes, what kind of accommodations are made for them? Are they homeless, or are they in
really tough
gymnasiums?
Heroic work being done to try to rebuild homes with temporary fixes, you know, like new tin roofs or plastic sheathing on the windows or whatever. That work is being done by NGOs, and it's amazing, and it's everywhere, and you see it. The other thing is a lot of people are getting out. I mean, Poland, God bless Poland. They have taken in, 1.5 plus million Ukrainian refugees into their own homes. This isn't, they'll build buildings and put them in the buildings. They're inviting people into their homes who they don't know just to help them.
Yeah.
It's an amazing act of humanity, and you see the trains, as I said, filled with these families who are going wherever they can, many of them to the United States. When Lot lost my luggage, I know it's a small problem, but it caused me a delay that was another beautiful opportunity for an eye-opening moment, which is here I am, very ticked off, sitting in JFK International Airport, missing a lot of Game 6. And I'm kind of worked up because I wanted to watch that game. And then I did start to catch the end of it, waiting for this bag. And I realized, wait a second, why are there like 50 bags here? Whose bags are these? And the guy in the lost luggage claim, he very humbly said to me, oh, those are the suitcases of people who are still being processed because they're refugees from Ukraine.
Oh,
and I said,
God.
okay.
Shut up.
Let's just see if I can go talk to some of these families. And I just waited for them, and their problems, what they're facing, what they're going through is really in the heart of anyone who's been in Ukraine. You can't leave the place and not feel like these people are going to make it. Their resiliency is admirable, and the suffering is extraordinary.
We're glad you're there. We're glad you're back safely. Charlie Sennett, good to see you as always. Thanks.
Charlie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been speaking to GBH News analyst Charlie Sennett. He's co-founder and editor-in-chief at the Ground Truth Project, and he's just back from Ukraine. Coming up, GBH's Jared Bowen. He's back from someplace too, but it's a Broadway show binge. He's seen a lot of shows down in New York City. He's going to tell us about them up next. You're listening to Boston Public.
Video games can get a bad rap when it comes to kids and mental health, but their impact on child development is often misunderstood.
You can use games to improve your social connections and to practice feeling emotions that we normally avoid, like guilt or grief or shame.
Hear that story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Bunker Hill Community College, offering students 6-week summer sessions to help them achieve their college and skill goals. 2 sessions starting June 5th and July 17th. Registration at bhcc.edu/summer. And A Blade of Grass, located in Sudbury, offering a wide range of landscape services to the Boston Metro West area, including landscape architecture, construction, and estate care. You can view their portfolio at abladeofgrass.com.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Public Library. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Joining us now is GBH's Executive Arts Editor, Jared Bowen, host of Open Studio on GBH2, fresh off, a Broadway binge in New York City. Jared, welcome home. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, Jared.
Our pleasure.
So Jim wants to know how you get tickets before we get any further.
I actually did want to know.
Yeah, he did want to know. Is it difficult, or can you just be, because you're an arts and culture reporter, get an inside deal, or what's the story?
Because I'm a journalist, I have access to. I talk to the press representatives for each show, and that's how my tickets are coordinated.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Sounds
on
like he's not telling us something, but okay.
Well, no, that's how it's just like it happens here.
So why can't I call him and say I'm a journalist?
You're not a culture guy.
I'm cultured, and I want to talk.
You are?
Cultured.
Semi-cultured.
That's the key.
Okay, forget it.
All right. So, I can't recall a play that's been done more, and maybe I'm just wrong. A Doll's House.
I've seen about 5 A Doll's House.
Every couple of years,
30 years.
There's a new production of the Doll's House. This time with Jessica Chastain as Nora.
Yeah, and I should mention, I always go down at this time of year, right before the Tonys, which are coming up in a couple of weeks, to see some of the most nominated shows. And this is one of them, nominated for Best Revival of a Play. It has 6 Tony nominations, including for Jessica Chastain. And this really strips down Ibsen's story of A Doll's House into its barest forms, both literally on the stage and in the script, which really tightens it up. So first, this is one show where you want to get there early, because I was seeing the 8 o'clock show on Saturday night, and at 7:45, the curtain lifts, and Jessica Chastain is sitting in this light blonde chair, her arch kind of backed, she has her arms crossed, and she's on this turnstile basically on the stage, and she's just sitting in this chair revolving, and you get a sense of who this character is already before the show even starts, Nora, and you can see that she has a lot of conviction in the way that her arms are crossed. You can see the way her neck is kind of arched. She's looking at the audience, and she's taking it all in. This is a woman who's thinking and absorbing, and then probably about 5 to 10 minutes before showtime, some of the other characters begin to gather on stage too. So, and I read a little bit about this later, and part of the concept is to just get over the celebrity. That yes, you're there in part to see Jessica Chastain, somebody you know so well from film, but also you've spent enough time with her at this point that you can just dive into this story.
Well, wait a second, but they tell you it starts at 8?
Yeah.
It does.
So what happens when you get there 2 minutes to 8? You're screwed.
You miss it.
Well, you see, you're just seeing her spin around the stage.
But why do they do that? Why don't they start it at 8 instead of 7:45?
Because it's not necessarily part of the show, but it's easing you into the show.
Okay.
So it was and maybe I've spoiled it for people. I didn't know that this was going to happen. So you're sitting there, and I actually never arrived that early. I happened to that night, and so it was such a treat to see this. And then, and now I'm thinking about it, getting my own mind around this. But this is the story of Nora, a woman who's trying to find agency in this play that is set in 1879, and in that era, as I think we can find links to today, the man of the house, her husband, controls how life is to be lived, controls who does what.
What's he, Torvid or something? What's his name?
Torvald,
close enough.
By the way, he was played by Ariane Moayed from Succession. We might remember him. He was the big tech guy a few seasons ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Also has a Tony nomination, and he's able to walk around the set and get up and move, but I realized about 3/4 of the way through, we never see Nora get off her chair. She's stuck in her chair in this doll's house that has been created for her. And so in the way it's stripped down in language too, it's more of a contemporary vernacular, but we're still getting at this story, which still, of course, I think has resonance as we think about the dynamic between the sexes, and having just come through the Me Too moment and understanding, movement I should say, and understanding how women are often made to feel and how women are treated in marriages. And final thing I'll say, without giving anything away, it was literally a jaw-dropping ending. My mouth fell open. It's something I had never seen done in theater before.
Oh, that's horrible to leave us hanging like this.
I know.
Is it different from
And I'm not going to say any more.
But then can I make a suggestion?
We have a clip
But
here.
before we do that, just to spice up this show, what if we started going round and round at like 10:45? No, I'm serious, just for a little je ne sais quoi.
You get a little chair right there.
Exactly,
just
start
spin
spinning around.
Yeah.
I would love to see.
Jamie, can you get on that?
I'd love to see
Thank
the
you,
posture.
appreciate it.
What posture would you adopt as you're spinning
I think
around?
I'd do just like Jessica Chastain, with my arms folded. What did she do?
Arms folded, kind of
Leaning back. I could do that. Eating a Jim and Marjorie sandwich.
I'd probably get seasick.
Okay, what do you want to play some sounders on?
This
What
is
is
a
it?
clip of Jessica Chastain
Oh, good.
speaking with PBS NewsHour's Jeffrey
Oh.
Brown about her role in A Doll's House, especially, and she's highlighting the part that Jared
this
just
is
talked
it.
about, how she sits and stares
Wow.
at the audience before the play starts.
This is a whole different way of working for me, because in the theater, you create like the fourth wall, right? And in some sense, I had fear of the audience. I was aware of every cough. I was aware of every single person who opened up their food and started eating, or their phones were going off. And I felt it all like almost like an assault. And in this production, it's been fascinating because I feel the exact opposite.
You have the exact same disease she has, that eating thing. Did you hear what she just said?
You could hear every bite. I'm
Exactly.
very delighted to hear Jessica Chastain
What's
say
that called again?
Misophonia.
Misophonia, thank you very
Misophonia.
much. What is
Okay.
that? Wow, you took a picture of this?
Yeah.
You're allowed to take a picture of this?
Yeah, it was. She talked about that.
That's pretty
afterward, too.
dramatic.
Yeah.
Because it's before the play.
This is before the play.
That's a pretty great shot. You want to show that to
Yes,
Marjorie or something?
yes.
I can't believe I'm
please do.
talking about showing things on the radio, but yeah,
It works really well on radio, by
She
the
expects
way.
this as well because it is such a strange moment, but it brings in that engagement and it brings down that fourth wall that she talked about.
If he holds it up to the camera, can anybody see this tiny little picture? No,
Probably
I don't
not.
think so. Well, you would have really liked it had you been able to see it, but unfortunately, you can't.
Okay,
now, can
that
we
takes
go
care
on
of that.
another play that I have to say, I'm not sure this would work for Shucked. And Shucked as in corn. Is
Corn.
that not correct?
All about
I mean, the
corn.
whole thing is like a corn experience,
The whole
correct?
thing is a corn
Yeah.
experience.
So explain
Corn
it to us.
experience.
This was one of the most delightful,
Oh.
funniest,
Really?
enjoyable shows
Whoa.
I have seen in a really, really, really long time. The other thing I do, because I have to winnow it down, there are so many great shows playing on Broadway right now, but I had to winnow it down to just a few, so I also check in with people. This is one show consistently. Everybody told me, you have to see this show.
What's this nominated for?
So this is nominated for Best Musical, some actor awards. It has 9 nominations.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's one of the most nominated shows. And the little backstory is that this has been gestating for many, many years, and it started off as the Hee Haw musical, and then Hee Haw and the Grand Ole Opry eventually got out of it. But this team came together, and they created this story about Maisie, get it, corn, Maisie,
I got it, thank you. Yeah.
who lives in Cobb County.
Oh, God.
Where nobody ever comes, nobody ever leaves because there are walls of corn or corn rows that they can't get out of. And she is going to marry her beau, and suddenly they realize the corn is dying. And so she takes it upon herself in this little county where the women are always smarter than the men, that the only way to deal with this is to actually get out of Cobb County and try to figure out how they're going to save their corn. So she goes, well, where else would you go but Tampa? And she runs into a podiatrist, a corn doctor. And
People are laughing at this? I mean, really?
It is so funny. And the jokes are so
pathetic.
Corny.
Thank you.
That it's absolutely hilarious. I'm going to repeat one of the jokes just so you can get a sense,
good, okay.
aside from the ones I
Okay,
just
go
mentioned.
ahead. Go ahead.
So one of the characters tells the other about a grave mistake that they've just made, and the other responds, no, a grave mistake was burying grandma on that slope.
What's the joke?
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Here is, no, that was really funny.
Grave mistake.
Here's a clip, we got
Grave
it.
mistake.
Here is a clip of Alex Newell performing Independently Owned from this very same musical on Broadway, Shucked.
I'm independently owned and modulated. And every man that I meet is just intimidated. I won't change who I always been. A W-O-M-A-N.
Okay,
That number gets a standing ovation among some of the audience members every night. Yeah. And so why this show works? It's first of all, we're laughing, and the jokes really are pretty funny and clever, more so than you'd expect, and more consistently. Yeah. This is also a really tight cast with great chemistry, but also it has a lot of heart to it. And so it's not just being funny for the sake of being funny, but there is actually a story here. It's also fresh and new and different, and it is about coming together and working this forward, and it's delightful.
Okay, so let's all agree that grave joke was horrible. Do you have another one that's any better than that one?
Well, I don't want to steal all their jokes.
Well, one more is not going to hurt anybody. Go ahead. You have another one?
No, I can't repeat the other one.
Okay, fine.
Remember when there was a big story about people getting lost in a corn maze up on Route 1 on the North Shore? They had to send.
You did a cover story in the Boston Herald. I remember like it was yesterday.
Yeah,
Didn't you get lost in the corn maze?
Well, the thing is, you could climb up on a ladder and see where you were. I couldn't figure out what the people that got lost in there, but I think they got lost in the corn maze. They had to call the police because they couldn't get out of there. Remember that?
I remember that.
Remember that story? Yeah.
Yeah, and you can really never leave breadcrumbs because the crows will just come and eat the breadcrumbs.
Another good point.
Exactly. So it is possible to get lost. I think it would be really difficult to get lost, but somebody did, and it ended well, though.
So this is Shucked, which you like, obviously, quite a bit.
Immensely, and I think that this is a show that is going to live for a long time by word of mouth. It'll tour, and if you can see it now in its beginning stages, definitely go to New York and see it.
All right.
Okay, so let's talk about Parade. Tell us about that.
So this is nominated for Best Revival of a Musical. It has 6 nominations, and this is a revival of the Jason Robert Brown musical, which tells the story of Leo Frank, a Jewish factory superintendent in Georgia in 1913 who was married to a Southern woman, but he had moved down from New York.
This is a true story.
This is a true story, and he was arrested for the murder of a young 13-year-old girl in his factory. And the evidence was pretty much abundant at the time that he had nothing to do with this, but his arrest had everything to do with him being Jewish. And so he was jailed and ultimately lynched. And so this is a musical that tells that story. And I just like A Doll's House, the themes are very, very resonant for today. And in fact, a few years ago in Georgia, the district attorney reopened that investigation. It still hasn't been meted out. And to determine what exactly happened. We know that with DNA and such, they can often go back to these super cold cases and find some resolution, but that hasn't happened. So I think it's a very important time to see this show. Very strong performances from Ben Platt and from Michaela Diamond, who has kind of rocketed up and has
Platt's from
had this great
that other
success.
huge...
Dear Evan Hansen.
Dear Evan Hansen, right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very strong, very extraordinary show.
We have a clip of this, too. Here's a clip of Michaela Diamond performing You Don't Know This Man from the Broadway musical Parade.
You come here with these horrifying stories, these contemptible conceits, and you say you understand how a man's heart beats, and you don't know a thing.
That's pretty good voice there.
Everybody in New York has been talking about her and the fact that people haven't seen her in this extraordinary voice, that she will probably go on to be one of the greats, and I think has a lock on the Tony for Best Actress in a Musical.
By the way, I just looked up this actor you mentioned in A Doll's House from Succession. It's Stewie, who's one of the critical TEF figures who ends up voting, spoiler alert, ends up voting for the Roy family and loses. I want to read you something, though, getting back, if I may, just for a minute to Shucked. Okay, I'm somebody who's gotten lost between my desk and the office coffee machine. But after a thorough investigation at the scene of a near-American tragedy, I'm back to report it's pretty damn hard to get lost in Connor's firm's corn maze and Danvers.
That's right.
Who wrote that?
I wrote that.
In
I wrote that
2011,
ago.
Marjorie.
Yeah, I wrote that. There's a ridiculous picture of me stuck in the corn maze.
So did you ruin the business?
But she was, apparently, as I go on to say, this mother called hysterical at 6 a.m., even though they were only 25 feet from the corn maze entrance, that they were all lost, including her newborn, and in a panic.
At 6 a.m.?
At 6 p.m., actually.
She left a newborn in the corn maze?
No, she was in the corn maze
with the newborn.
And they were lost, and their
Wow.
fun, she said, had turned into a nightmare. This is according to the Herald. We had to give everybody names. She was heretofore known as May's mom.
Yeah, that is such a Herald thing. It's no worse than Shucked, though. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right?
That's right. But apparently they sent the police and the fire trucks down. The 101st Airborne might have gone as well to rescue this family 25 feet in from the entrance of the
So
corn
do you
maze.
see like 3 plays in 24 hours, essentially?
Well, a little bit more spread out, but essentially, yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
That's really
And it's
great.
fun because I ran into a lot of people from Boston this last weekend,
You did?
actually, and they were all doing the same thing.
Really?
Yep.
Pre-Tony binge kind of thing?
Broadway binge, yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
So tell us about Georgia O'Keeffe at the Museum of Modern Art, which is also in New York City. You had a very busy weekend.
Well, yeah, I love doing this and running around and seeing what's happening in New York, but there's a really interesting show at the Museum of Modern Art right now, and it's called To See Takes Time, and it looks at the span of Georgia O'Keeffe's life from 1915 to 1964, so when she was about 28 years old till her late 70s. And I think we're all very familiar with her paintings, her very minimalist paintings, looking at flowers or landscapes, often pieces that can be connected in the mind's eye to the human body. But for this period of time, she was also working on paper and making charcoals and watercolors and drawings. And if you know this kind of work, this is a moment where you can have experimentation because you can rework it, unless it's watercolor. And then that you have to get it down onto the piece of paper immediately because then it dries, and it's very hard to change unless you're trying to change color. So we really see how she's thinking, and I found it mesmerizing. For one of the first pieces I saw, she actually described as the interior of her head during a headache. And so you see the storm that she's creating in charcoal. There's another moment where she was looking at a tent in West Virginia, and she takes those triangular forms and she just kind of works through them successively. And then the imagery for the show comes from, I think it's called Evening Star, a
Which
piece
I
that
thought
she
there was
created
one
over and
of,
over
there
again.
were 8 of, I read this morning.
Because she would also work in a series and continue taking these little themes and how can I change it slightly? What variations can I make until I can get there?
But I was right, there are 8 versions of this by her.
8 versions, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Okay, tell us about the...
No, don't tell us about it. Tell us about you.
Oh,
Is this your last show on Friday night?
Yes, we're very upset.
Well, what's going on exactly? What is going on? I mean, we work here. I'm not sure we know what's going on. What is going on?
What I can tell you is I'm very proud of this, that I have loved doing Open Studio for 10 years.
You're fabulous.
And it's a show that meant a lot to me and to our team because we provided accessibility to the arts and all manner of performer and artist and studio and institutions. And yes, our series finale is coming up on Friday because the show has meant so much to me. I wanted to make the last several shows just conversations about art. I didn't actually do a lot of research before any of my guests came on, which is very unusual for me. I like to read as much as humanly possible because I just wanted to have more organic conversations. So I brought back 2 people with whom I've had fabulous conversations in the past. One is the Grammy-winning singer-songwriter Lori McKenna.
Oh, great. I love her.
She is wonderful.
Local.
Yes, she's
Stoughton
local.
native.
Writes all these songs for Nashville, right?
Humble and Kind.
Yes.
Which is
Girl
one of my-
Crush.
Girl Crush.
Girl
One of the
Crush.
great songs ever.
And then my final guest is the Tony-winning actor Alan Cumming.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So I assume people read the Globe story about the final episode, and GBH's leader is saying there's going to be even better and expanded arts coverage and culture coverage in the future. Can you tell us?
I don't know much more than that. I do know that GBH is committed to expanding arts and culture, and I think...
and you're going to be part of this.
And I am going to very much be a part of it. I do what I do because I love what I do. I think the arts are so important to our society now more than ever. We have the privilege, the freedom to bring arts into people's homes, and I have every intention of continuing that, as do we have a very, very tight team at GBH, led by Chelsea Mers, and we all believe this equally and plan to continue.
Chelsea Mers used to be our leader before
Yes,
she was yours.
she was.
I have to say, I know I speak for Marjorie, we said last week, the show was fabulous.
Yes, I'm
you
gonna
were
miss it
fabulous on
very,
it.
very much.
And we're looking forward to the announcement of any and all plans that speak to this expansion with you at the core. So lots of luck, and you have a lot to be proud of, Jared.
Well, thank you. And I thank all the people who've written in called over the last few weeks. I will miss the show very much too, but I'm also someone who loves to look forward, and I like to have new challenges and to move on to different things, and so I will do that.
I prefer to look backwards and be angry. That's shortens your life, but it actually is much more satisfying.
Yeah, or you can look forward and be angry too, Jim.
Well, I can do that. I'll do that
Any
after
direction,
the show.
or straight ahead.
In all seriousness, I shouldn't even be joking. You are fabulous. You'll be fabulous in the future. We love you, and you are one really talented character. So good luck, Jared. We're looking forward to the future.
Thank you very much. We are looking forward to the future. And we have been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, whose wonderful show, Open Studio. The last Open Studio is going to be this Friday night, 8:30. With a great cast. Right here in GBH2. You want to catch it, or a DVR. No, we don't DVR anymore, do we?
You sort of do.
Whatever we do, we record things.
Two great guests, too.
Okay. Yes, great guests. You've had a million great guests. Okay.
I've never been on Open Studio, actually.
I think you were. Weren't you on Open Studio?
No,
once when
I was
you guys
never
were
on Open
like
Studio.
A play date? Oh no, it was at your show.
No, it was on my show. Notice I had Jared on my show regularly. He never had me on the show. But by the way, I've gotten over it. It's obvious. I'm not upset about it at all. Now that the show's folding, you could have had me on the last show. Local talent.
Okay.
Apparently not.
And
No
you're,
room.
You're cultured.
Exactly.
That's right.
Thank you.
When the phone don't ring.
You weren't on either, so don't be bragging over there.
I was not. I barely made it onto his show once in like 10 years. Jim. Okay, coming up, CNN's John King joins us via Zoom to discuss the debt ceiling deal and more. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News, and we are broadcasting from the Boston Public Library.
The GBH Spring Auction is now live. It's your chance to pick up some great deals for yourself or gifts for your friends and family. Bid on everything from fine art and sports memorabilia to gift certificates and even getaways. Every winning bid helps support the local news and quality journalism you depend on from GBH. The auction runs through June 1st, so bid high and bid often. Online at auction.gbh.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Boston Foundation. Knowing it will take all of us to improve lives and strengthen communities, TBF partners with leaders and changemakers to close opportunity gaps, advance equity, and power a better Boston. Learn more at tbf.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, a health plan connected to a world-leading healthcare system, committed to providing innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Learn more at massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We're now joined on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, host of Inside Politics weekdays at noon. Hello there, John King.
Happy busy Tuesday.
And
Hello,
to you.
John King. Well, before we go, we have to talk to you about the Celtics. We're all devastated here. But
No, you don't.
Yeah, tough night. But let's get to something else that's tough. These negotiations over the debt ceiling. Where are we now, John King?
There's a revolt to Speaker McCarthy's right. House Freedom Caucus members today saying not only do they think no Republican is the way they guys say, we don't remember this, but he says that McCarthy agreed back then that only if every Republican on the Rules Committee supported something would it come to the floor. And there are going to be at least 2 votes against it from Republicans in the committee. So Chip Roy says McCarthy has not only, in his view, negotiated a bad deal with the president, but that he's broken his word about his deal to become Speaker. And so they're going to try to beat the bill. The first big vote is in the Rules Committee this afternoon. They're going to try to beat the bill. And then after that, Marjorie and Jim, I think the question is, does McCarthy face a challenge? His camp is confident, number one, that it will go away, or number two, that he would survive it. But a lot of drama, not just about the debt deal, but about McCarthy's hold on the gavel.
And there are rumors, almost all the stories written this weekend after the deal was announced Friday night between McCarthy and Biden on a phone call, is that as much as the Chip Roys and the right are upset, a lot of the Democrats on the left are upset. But I'm assuming the vast majority of Democrats are going to vote for this after their, in some cases, legitimate complaining. But as Obama said, elections have consequences. The House is controlled by Republicans.
Right, and so it takes a lot to defy your president, or in the looking case, your House Speaker. So in the president's case, there are a number of progressives who are going to vote no. Significantly for the president, the New Democratic Coalition, which is about 98 members, they're more centrist, more moderate members. Doesn't mean they'll all vote for it, but that group endorsed the deal. So that gives you the math you need, right? If McCarthy, let's say McCarthy loses 40 votes or 30-something votes, the Democrats seem to have more than enough votes here to get this through the House. And then it goes to the Senate, and there'll be a fight there too. Republican Mike Lee of Utah, Tea Party guy, says he doesn't like this deal, but there'll be a fight there too. But Mitch McConnell is for it. So you can see this getting to the president's desk. And it is essentially a traditional Washington compromise. The Republicans control only the House, right? The Democrats have the White House and the Senate. Republicans did get some pretty big concessions here. They did not get anywhere near everything they wanted. But it's sort of a traditional Washington deal, a sort of a reasonable deal. Most people with experience looking at how these things tend to work out. The problem is we don't live in traditional times. So, yes, there's going to be some sour grumping at the president. We think he'll be okay. There's a lot of outward fighting and revolt against the speaker. We'll watch that one.
Well, a couple of things, John. Number one, you got to wonder, it can't be much fun to be Kevin McCarthy, worrying about your job hanging by a thread every single solitary day and having to keep debasing yourself all the time. What do people say about his state of mind?
This is a really interesting moment, Marjorie, in the sense that if you go back to January and how difficult it was and how you can call it theater, you can call it farce, you can call it humiliating, depending on your political perspective, you probably pick your own word for it. But McCarthy to date, right, so February, March, April into May, for 4 months, Republicans have actually been pretty unified. McCarthy has actually managed the sheep, kept the herd on the pasture, if you will, pretty well, and he was getting more compliments for it. Even through the last minutes, last days of this negotiation, he was getting a lot of compliments. This is the first big test. And so does he get rocked here, and does he potentially lose the gavel? I would put that on the way out on the edge. But does he lose the gavel, or is he a weaker speaker because of the disaffection now among those who held their nose at the beginning and have become more supportive but now are in revolt? Or does this make him stronger if there is a challenge and he survives it? I do think that McCarthy is now the major subplot, weaker, stronger, or gone out of the debt ceiling debate.
I'm sorry.
I have one more question.
I do too.
Part of the negotiation had to do with taking funding from the IRS, and we've been reading for months or longer how the IRS really doesn't have the firepower to go after a lot of tax cheats, very wealthy tax cheats, and then if they were getting that money from those tax cheats, it would be a significant amount of money. So what is the Republican argument against trying to get people to pay their taxes that should pay their taxes?
It's the same argument you hear when somebody proposes, making it take 10 more seconds to buy a gun, then they're going to come for you. They just say that the Biden IRS that's a lie, that Biden doesn't mean it. They're not going to go after wealthy people. They're going to go after everybody.
Okay.
That's been their knock on it, or that they're going to be over aggressive even in going after rich people. So they are taking $10 billion or so from the IRS funding. And so the president lost there, if you will. It's $80 billion total.
Well, 70, right, exactly. $70 billion is not being withdrawn.
Right. So the president loses a little bit of that money. $10 billion to us is a lot of money. In Washington, I guess it's changed. But he loses $10 billion, and the president lost that, but then he won it, and that money was repurposed to other things the president wants to spend it on. So they're, again, and they pull back some of the COVID funding. They keep defense spending up, and some other spending is capped, stays flatlined. This is a trade-off, right? This is a normal relationship, trade-off. The question is, McCarthy's having a hard time selling it to those who, even though they know they only have a 4 or 5 seat House majority, think somehow they can run Washington. And again, that's their perspective, and they're pushing the speaker really hard.
John, the one thing that I was totally unaware was even on the table, and maybe it's because I didn't read thoroughly enough until the deal was announced, that part of it, the elimination of the pause on repayment of student loans, and that surprised me that Biden bought in almost more than anything else. And tell me if my thinking is skewed here. There's at least a decent likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to rule that what Joe Biden did is unconstitutional, mainly the forgiveness, I know Ayanna Pressley doesn't like to call it forgiveness, repayment, whatever you want to call it. And if it comes right on the heels of the president agreeing to dump the pause in payment, it seems to me, even though it's not his fault, the Supreme Court of the United States, if they rule the other way, we don't know yet, that it's really a dangerous thing. I saw one of the headlines on your show was, young voters may be the key for Democrats. I don't know what the discussion was about. It seems to me that matters a lot to young voters, and he may get blamed big time, particularly because he agreed to this pause thing, the end of the pause.
I think you're absolutely right about in terms of messaging, selling, explaining yourself, trying to make the sale to people. That's one of the niches, if you will, the president and the Democrats are going to have to do some work on, and progressives are not happy about that. The calculation at the White House is, we had to give some place, and there are other things the Republicans are asking for. And given the uncertainty of the program anyway, that the Supreme Court, that in a month or two we're going to hear from the Supreme Court, they decided that, of a whole bunch of unpalatable things, that one was more palatable, I guess, because the Supreme Court, we're going to hear from the Supreme Court anyway, which will either end the conversation or reset the conversation. So trade it off now and hope you can deal with it later.
One thing, and it's very hard because we watch John's show while we're live on the air. So it's sort of odd. Right. So you get the headlines, you see the graphics. One graphic.
It's
what's
way
that?
Better on mute. It's a much better show on mute.
One graphic that I love that I want you to explain to us. You had the pictures of three really wealthy guys, multi-billionaires, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, I didn't know the third guy. And why was that graphic up there? It's sort of a fascinating little factoid, John King.
The third guy is Bernard Arnault, who's a fashion icon, is because those three billionaires, they're not the only three, but they're the three richest of the billionaires. They are worth more than the United States Treasury now has on hand.
Oh, my God.
So the three of them have more money than the Treasury of the United States has on hand as of May 29th. That is a pretty good little note.
Elon may have to bail us out, Jim.
He very well may. I wouldn't hold my breath.
So,
I was gonna say, it's like,
So I can't move on before mentioning that Joe Manchin is going to get his pipeline, I think, too. So we're not really doing.
Well, that's important. You should.
Well, it's very important. It's also disappointing because we're not really addressing climate change still. This is getting worse and worse.
I mean, in fairness, a lot of the bill that had close to $500 million in climate stuff, the broadest ever, a lot of that survived, John, correct? Even though the Manchin thing upsets me too.
Again, to the trade-off thing, right? The entire what Biden calls the IRA, the Investment Act. The Republicans started this conversation saying they wanted to repeal the whole thing. They essentially wanted to repeal the Biden agenda, passed so far, and they didn't. They didn't, and that's the challenge of the president's argument. To your point, Marjorie, is I know to a climate activist, environmental activist, I know you're PO'd about this Joe Manchin winning on this one. However, look at the, I could have given them, they wanted the whole pie. They got a slice that I know makes you really angry. That's the challenge coming out of this, because in divided government, you have to compromise. There's no other way around it. And, both sides are trying to spin that they did okay in this negotiation. That's based on my reading of it. That's actually pretty fair, right? Nobody's happy, but nobody lost a ton. The Republicans made a down payment if they can make the argument. They made a down payment on fiscal restraint. The president can make the argument that he saved some of the bigger, more important, longer-term programs that they wanted to rip apart.
Okay, John King, let's move on to Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California. I think she's 89. 89. Okay, thank you. And she was suffering from shingles. Now, apparently, she has been suffering from encephalitis as well, which can swell your brain and cause you difficulties with memory and brain functioning. Apparently, she was confused over Kamala Harris. That's the latest thing. Tell us about that and what, if anything, is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know all the details of the particular episode there, but there's no question that Senator Feinstein is sometimes in and out of it, if you will. That's not a medical description, and if I'm offending anybody, I apologize. This is a really hard one for people, in that she's a Democratic icon. She's a legend in the Democratic Party. She's a trailblazer as a woman in American politics, and yet she is clearly has a series of health issues on her hands. And so she's been confused sometimes about who she's talking to and who's in the room. She has been confused at times about how long she was gone from Washington. She and her staff say she is back now trying to do the best she can on important issues. I really think now it's sad. It's sad. And so people view this through their own partisan perspective. And there are a lot of Democrats saying there's ageism and sexism at play here. There are others saying we're simply trying to, the Senate's the Democrats control the Senate and they want to get as much as they can. It's largely judges and other presidential appointments because you can't pass a lot of real legislation and the like. So they say they need her vote. It's really a horrible issue to talk about, given her history in Washington, where she's very well regarded and respected by a lot of Republicans too. So I think the challenge here is to get through this session. They pass the debt deal, they go home for a summer break, and then I think there is an open issue. Does she come back for the end of the year? She says she wants to finish her term and just have the election next year. Most Democrats privately would tell you they see that as most unlikely. But at the moment, that is the position she and her staff are taking. And I think we're going to watch this day by day, because there will be more of these questions about her competence.
Well, one last thing about this. I may be totally off base. And by the way, obviously everybody feels sympathy. She's suffering pretty dramatically, but democracy matters too. And I think it's fairly clear to me, from having read everything I can, that she's not performing the function that she was elected to do. But it seems to me, John, it's not just about partisan stuff, it's about intra-party stuff. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That if she were to resign, Gavin Newsom, the governor, says he'd pick a black woman. There are a lot of people who are supporting announced candidates who are not black women, like Adam Schiff and Katie Porter and people like that. And the reality is the black woman acting, or interim senator appointed by Newsom, obviously is going to have a leg up after she gets to serve for a year plus. So it's that too, is it not? Stick it out as long as you can. So my candidate, Schiff, for example, who Nancy Pelosi supports, has a good shot. Is that not fair?
That is certainly part of the whispering and the rumors and the sort of sharp elbows that come with any dicey political situation. Now, could Governor Newsom, if Senator Feinstein were to step aside, could he find an elder stateswoman, from the
Who's
California,
not going to run for re-election? That's a very good point.
Find an African-American woman in California who you're giving rewarding for a lifetime of public service, who says that she would not run. That's your way around it. But Governor Newsom hasn't said that. Hasn't said he would do that because he doesn't want to offend Senator Feinstein. And so that's what you have this swirl, Jim. Until things are definitive. Especially in the social media age and the internet age, and politics has always been snarky. It's just more visible now, I guess. See it all the time, and so it gets distasteful in some ways.
So we have to go, but before we do, I had an event I had to go to last night. How did the Celtics do? Were they on to the finals? What happened? What happened?
The game was over about 3 minutes in, which I guess made it easier to digest. They just, give them credit for roaring back from down 0-3, but they just didn't show up in their own arena last night. They were not there. And, you can blame Jason Tatum's ankle roll. You can blame this, you can blame that. They just did not show up. So I think there's as a kid from Dorchester watching, I think there's no doubt it's an incredibly talented roster. There's also no doubt there's something missing about heart and effort and physicality come playoff time. And Brad Stevens and the owners are going to have to make some tough decisions, I think.
So I guess they lost.
They did lose.
They lost.
They did lose.
By a lot.
By a lot. They got crushed.
Hey, John, it's wonderful to see you as always.
Thanks
you
very
so much. See you
John
next
King.
week.
Go Red Sox.
Go Red Sox. We've been speaking with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, host of Inside Politics, which you can watch every weekday at noon on CNN. Coming up, would you take an airplane flight if you had to step on a scale and weigh yourself before you could get on the airplane? Well, it's happening. It may be happening on an airplane near you very soon. We're talking weighing yourself before flying. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. The number you can call or text us if you want to weigh in.
That's a good one.
877-301-8970, 877-309. Is that right? 877-301-8970. Thank you very much, John Parker, back at the studio. Weigh yourself before you get in an airplane. That's next. We're opening the lines.
From the forest encampments of activists protesting Atlanta's Cop City to the swanky LA hotels of the annual Teen Vogue Summit, Takeaway digital producer Zachary Bynum is looking back at his best work. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and that's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Mitsubishi Electric, providing homeowners access to heating and cooling solutions with electric heat pump systems that can also achieve their sustainability goals. Learn more at mitsubishicomfort.com/NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Mark Regan. We're live at the library, streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Before we move to having to weigh yourself before you get on a plane, I want to read you and Jamie a text, and you have to guess who sent it. You ready?
Okay, yep.
Gee, so easy to attack us, so perhaps you should ask people like me what's going on. Who wrote that text?
Somebody from the MBTA?
Wrong. Jamie, you want to guess? That would be the House Chair of the Transportation Committee, Bill Strauss from Mattapoisett.
Oh, okay.
Who actually we have praised in the past, but obviously we were trashing the legislature today, which means I guess we were trashing him. He said he'd like them to be represented. He is totally right. He said it doesn't have to be him. Well, it should be him. He and maybe his co-chair from the Senate. We will invite the transportation co-chairs to join us to respond to the criticism that not only Jim and Stacey had, but frankly, we were more critical than even our guests. So in fairness, we'll do that. Of course, we should have anyway. So as if summer travel isn't stressful enough, New Zealand, which I hear is spectacular, will make all passengers aboard their national airline weigh themselves before boarding planes out of Auckland. Is that how you say it, Auckland? I think so. International Airport for the next month. They say it's part of a passenger weight survey to gather data about load, literally distribution. I shouldn't laugh in their planes. In our remaining minutes, we're opening the phone and text lines. 877-301-8970. Would you do anything that requires you to step on a scale before doing it? For example, getting on this plane. Remember that restaurant we talked about years ago? It was an all-you-can-eat place where you had to weigh yourself before you went in. How about boarding a 17-hour nonstop flight, or one of those little planes where you do have to, they sort of guess what your weight is? How about that person we saw this morning riding a horse? If you're obese and you're riding a horse, I'm sorry, it is what it is. At this one horse place, you have to attach yourselves to helium balloons. Is that not right?
That is correct.
I think that's a bit much.
Yeah, and then they have people following behind you with these giant paddles to make sure that the helium balloons are not pierced by any of the branches that the horse may go through.
Well, you need them. 877-301-8970. Is there anything, I don't even like weighing myself when I go to the doctor. By the way, I went to the doctor. I was a little late the other day for our prep meeting. I had an appointment. You know what I did, which is pathetic, but I think I took off my shoes.
Why'd you do that
before?
too?
What does that weigh? Like a third of a pound?
I don't know, but everybody wants to take off their shoes.
But you weigh what you weigh.
You want to empty your pockets and take off your shoes.
You know what I did?
I
kept one foot on the floor the whole time. 877-301-8970. Is there anything you would do, even if you loved the thing you were about to do, if they required you to weigh yourself before engaging in the activity?
They say no one is going to find out. But, Harvard Pilgrim didn't tell everybody they were going to have all their information, including their social security numbers, hacked in a breach.
Do you remember that story a couple of years ago where some woman, I think it was on a small plane, had to stand on a baggage thing and weigh herself? Do you know I've been on this is totally true. I was in Costa Rica a couple of years ago, and I was on a small plane. It was only like 4 people, my family, a couple other people. On my honor, I was the only person sitting, maybe one other, on the right side of the plane.
There were 12 people on the left side of the plane.
But it was a decent number of smaller people.
On the right-hand side of the plane.
Exactly. It was humiliating.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see...
Oh, you wouldn't mind weighing yourself because you're not, you don't have an issue.
I would take off my shoes, too. I think everybody does that. It's a natural thing.
You do it when you go to the doctor? I refuse to believe
I do.
that.
I take off my shoes.
You're not looking at me, you're lying.
I take off my shoes. I take off my coat. I don't want to be weighed in my heavy winter coat, and I don't want to be weighed with my shoes on.
Well, my doctor got in the other day. I was stripped down naked. She was really... upset since I wasn't there for a physical, but I weighed less than I would have.
Did you weigh less? Okay, you can lose a pound or two. And if you wear cargo pants or cargo shorts, you want to empty your pockets.
That's what Nicole said. Our coworker said she has her cargo stuffed all the time.
Yeah, if you
that's a real problem.
With hammers and screwdrivers and stuff like that, you want to take them out of your
I generally walk around with a hammer on my pants.
But you never know when you have
speak. I didn't even mean that.
Okay.
I'm not feeling well, obviously.
Okay, Jim. Chris.
Can we start this segment over? Is this live? Okay.
Chris from Lowell. Thank you for calling.
Sorry, Chris. It's Marjorie. It's not me. It's acting like this. I apologize for her. It's unconscionable.
I think, Jim, the Kiwis call it Auckland.
Auckland.
I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed, actually. Thank you for that, Chris.
Okay.
What's up?
My quick point was,
what is it?
I think that weighing people before they go on a plane is kind of like another form of a sin tax.
Yes.
You know, people look at overweight people as if they have some kind of a problem with self-control, but there's lots of things going on.
Exactly.
Some people are on pharmaceuticals, like myself, antidepressants that cause them to gain tons of weight. Some people have metabolic disorders.
Exactly.
So it's really discriminating against some people that don't deserve to be discriminated against. And then, you know, there's other people like athletes. Like, I weigh 230 pounds, but I'm in pretty good shape. But that means I'm going to have to pay more because I'm healthy. So it's either discriminating against healthy people that are big or sick people or just people that are overweight that don't deserve to be discriminated against. My last point.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, the airlines have been reducing the space for people to sit, adding more people, and taking more commercial stuff.
Yeah.
So it's actually a problem with the airlines. They should free up the space for people that pay the price of a ticket.
Chris, you are one hell of an advocate. That was an excellent,
you thought this through.
call. And what did he say it was? What is it?
Auckland?
Auckland?
I don't know.
Whatever.
But, you know,
Chris,
I
thank you.
don't think they're going to charge you more. They're not going to make you pay more.
How about, did you read about that restaurant in Guangzhou in China? Where because there's an obesity crisis, this is President Xi is ordering this, that you get, what is it? You get, if you're at a certain weight, you get X number fewer meals per table.
Right.
To share with all your dinner mates.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. They're also worried about food shortages, right?
Well, that's another issue.
That's one of the big things they're worried about, food shortages. But this is
food waste, not food shortage.
This is like
well,
going
food
up
waste
to check in on the airplane, and I guess they put you in the same place where they put your baggage, and then you're supposed to take off your shoes and stand on the baggage thing. And
if you're over a certain weight, they put you in the cargo hold, which can get...
They don't put you in the cargo hold.
It's not embarrassing, but it's really
but
cold.
Someone said on a small plane, you have to make sure if you don't want to have too many people that are heavy in the back of the small plane because
not in the back,
the
in the
tail
side.
won't get off the ground.
No, that wasn't the. Well, I don't know about that. By the way, this is a serious story. I literally was on the right side of the plane with one other person, while everybody else was on the left side of this little tiny plane.
Mary in Salem, thank you for calling.
That's true, Marjorie.
I believe you, Jim. I believe it.
Wait. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I heard you. Hi.
This is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
I love your show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
This actually happened to me many years ago. I had to travel a lot for business, and I was on a little puddle jumper, and they asked me how much I weighed. So in the space of a couple of seconds, I was faced with the dilemma. Do I tell them my real weight?
No, you lie. You lie.
Right, exactly.
The plane goes down, it goes down, Mary.
So my pretend weight. And I thought, oh my God, you know, if I tell them my pretend weight and the plane goes down, it's on my conscience.
That'd be unfortunate, yes. So what'd you do?
Yeah, and then I told them the real weight.
Oh.
And then when I got on the plane, they had to rearrange the people on the plane to where they sat.
Exactly, that's what happened to me.
So, yeah, and I felt like ballast.
That's right.
Good line, Mary.
If things don't, it doesn't fly that well, Mary, they have to throw you overboard to
That's
get
a real
the
dilemma.
equilibrium back.
We should have asked the question Mary's asked.
The ballast question.
No, not the ballast question. The lying question.
That's
do you
right.
tell the truth, which makes the flight safer, or do you lie to protect your self-esteem? By the way, Larry David on Curb Your Enthusiasm was Susie, who's one of the funniest characters in the history of comedies. He's dealing with the same issue about weights on planes. In this case, it's a private plane during season 10 of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I need your weights, by the way,
What do you mean?
for the plane.
You fucking kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. It's a
I'm not
safety
giving you
issue.
the weight.
This is a regulation. This is
Ask Jeff if he'll give you his weight.
You're not going to give me your weight?
She doesn't even know how much I weigh. You know who else doesn't know how much I weigh? My doctor.
It's very personal. I'd rather be dead in the Sea of Cortez than have you know what I weigh.
What a line. That's Susie. She is the best. 877-301-8970 is the number. Where are we going
A lot
next?
of people are talking about having to get weighed on small planes. They weigh you, they weigh your luggage.
You've never been weighed
Aaron
on a
from
small plane?
I don't think I've been on that small of a plane. Aaron from Cambridge says it's happened to him overseas, and they claim it's for balancing the load, but the total matters too. So
What does that mean?
The total weight in the plane.
Well, obviously it does too, but you have to balance it first, and then you figure, well, maybe not first. Maybe you have to figure out if you can do it. What's this thing about the rear of the plane? It can't take off? Is that made
Well, they're
up?
saying there's too many. One of the texters said that if there's too many heavy people in the back of the plane won't be able to get off the ground,
Yeah.
which would be awful.
That'd be horrible.
It keeps trying
take off.
and trying and
Just
trying,
keeps
and then
trying.
it gives up and doesn't
It's
make
really
it.
sad if it keeps trying and never takes off. I mean, how sad is that? Just keeps going around and around.
The plane just gives
and
up.
Around. Plane gives up.
Debbie from Rhode Island, what do you think, Debbie?
Debbie, what's your deal?
Okay, my deal is that I had that experience.
Oh.
And I was in Africa, and there were probably about a dozen women who boarded before us.
Yeah.
They limit your luggage weight, but I'm about 105 pounds.
Whoa.
All of these big women got on the plane, and they were easily twice my weight, and they're all sitting in the front, and I'm not an easy flyer on these small planes.
Me
I
either.
was really nervous.
Me too.
And the co-pilot came to sit in the back with my husband and I,
Yeah.
and he's shaking his head no. So it did nothing for my comfort, right? So about 3/4 of the way down the runway, the pilot hit the brakes and aborted the takeoff.
Why?
Because he couldn't get enough lift.
Was I on that flight?
Oh my God.
And exactly to your point,
Debbie.
Jim, we turned around and we started again. And by that point, I thought I was going to lose
Oh my
it.
God.
But we actually were able to take off at that point.
Wait a
Didn't do
second.
anything
You
for
didn't
my
say,
comfort flying
take me
small
back
plane.
to the airport after they had too much weight and then they tried again?
Exactly.
That is terrifying.
Oh my God.
Debbie, we're glad
that's
you made it.
exactly what
Thanks
the
for the
texter was
call.
talking. The plane can't get off. The plane can't get off the ground. Michelle from Portsmouth said she had to step on a scale before zip lining twice. Only the staff member sees it, supposedly. If you're over the weight limit, which is well posted, you cannot zip line. And then somebody else is talking about, because full body scans and pat downs aren't traumatizing enough. Nothing like public weighing to destroy your one remaining shred of dignity. That's from Abby in Norwood.
Do
And
you remember
it
when
is
they got
true.
the full body scanners
Full
at
body
Logan
scanners,
for
put
the
your
first
arms
time?
over your
You're
head.
like naked,
That's right.
essentially.
And they say nobody can see them. That's what they say. But like I said, Harvard Pilgrim didn't know everybody's going to know your social security number from the hack in their system there.
Did I tell you that it is so, I've had weight, right now I'm okay, I guess. But I've had weight issues off and on my whole life. Do you know, I've told you this before.
Mm-hmm.
You ever take those tests online about how long you're going to live, life expectancy?
You've taken them constantly.
I lie about stuff. And you're saying to yourself, no one's going to see this except you. How does it help you to lie about how much you weigh and about illnesses you've had? I mean, what's that about?
We have a lot of texters that are responding to your hammer remark before.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. And Marjorie took it that way because she always takes things that
Jim
way.
the Hammer Browdy.
Okay,
they like
fine.
that nickname for you. That's going to be your new nickname,
Well, there was
Jim.
another nickname I had, as you know.
Yes, we do know that. Yes, we do. We can't
say
say
that
it
on
here.
this station.
No, we
On
can't.
the old station,
The old
we could say
station,
it,
a
but
little
not
low
here.
road. Jan from the living room. Hi,
Whoa.
Jan.
Hi, Jan.
Hi. How are you?
Excellent.
Just a quick funny story that the issue reminded me of. My cousin was 60 years old and wanted to go skydiving with his brother-in-law. And my cousin's brother-in-law is a husky guy, to put it lightly. And they called the company to check on the weight limit. And they told my cousin that, it's 250 pounds. So he asked his brother-in-law, they were on a conference call, he said, can you make 250? And the response was, I can if I go without any clothes, but I'm not buying the video.
So what happened?
Oh, my God.
They went, and they had to peel the brother-in-law off the wing of the plane to get him to jump, but, it all went well.
Wow.
They have to go tandem if you've never...
Yeah, don't you go
skydived
face to
before
face? So if you're with somebody and you're naked and you're doing it to face, that could be good, could be bad. What?
Not face-to-face.
Oh, I thought it was.
They're strapped to your belly like you're in a Baby Bjorn thing on the
I
guy's
got it.
chest.
Okay. Well, that still could be inconvenient. Jan, thank you. That's an excellent story. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, listen to this one. I went to the Great Wolf Lodge, an indoor water
I know where
park
that
in
is.
Fitchburg.
I know where that is.
And they have cargo-sized scales before the water slides to check you
That's
don't max
humiliating.
out the tubes. Already vulnerable and uncomfortable in a bathing suit? Here, now step on the scale.
How
Well,
humiliating
I
is
guess
that?
you want to avoid that place.
Why
if
can't
you're
we
worried
trust
about-
people to be honest?
Well, because one of our texters says I weigh 185, but I identify myself as weighing 125.
Well, of course, I just answered. I lied on that life expectancy thing with no one watching.
I think if you're 185 and you say 125, people might notice a difference, don't you think?
Yeah.
I think so. Diane in Fairhaven, what do you think,
have 1 minute, Diane.
Oh,
It's
we're
all we
almost
have
out of time.
left.
Sorry.
Margie doesn't know that. Yeah, hi.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Hi,
nice
Dan.
to talk to you.
You too.
17 years ago, I was 330 pounds.
Whoa.
Wow.
I lost 200 pounds.
Good for
within 2
you.
months.
Good for you.
Thank you. But if it were a safety issue, when I purchased my ticket, if I was informed that over a certain body weight, I need to check in a private area to be weighed, if it was for safety reasons, I would not have had a problem because I would be putting others at risk. So, but if it was for, like you said before, research purposes or something, no way.
I think that's a wise distinction there,
Very
Diane.
wise.
Congratulations
Yeah,
on your
that
weight
is
loss. That's
fantastic,
great.
Diane. Wow. I guess those gastric bypass things really work, right?
Yeah. Well, also that drug, people are taking that drug.
Oh, Ozempic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is advertised everywhere now.
Everywhere.
That was because we have a weight problem in the United States of America.
Do you know
but
the
we are
show's
done.
over?
The show is over.
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening to another
Thank you.
edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kine. What are you laughing at?
Someone text Guglielmo, Succession was massively overrated. This is a tweet. And the fact that Jim Bradley liked it proves my point.
There you go, Jim.
There you
go.
Thank you, Guglielmo.
Shirley Young, a Boston Globe's business columnist, is going to join us, as well as presidential inaugural poet Richard Blanco and naturalist Cy Montgomery with some of the most incredible animal stories you could ever imagine. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Thank you, John, for fixing the phone number mistake for me. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Thanks to the team here at the Boston Public Library, Angelica Marrero, Evelyn Brito, and Steve Baracci.
Wait a second. You didn't know the correct number? John had to tell you what the number was?
I made a mistake.
I know you made a mistake.
877-301-8970.
But you didn't know it until John told you?
I did. It sounded wrong, but John in my ear straightened me out.
Okay, fine.
And we're very grateful. Thanks to people who came down to the Boston Public Library. Really appreciate it.
By the way, we'll be back on Friday, and we'll be weighing all the people in the audience. We're only allowed 11,000 pounds on Friday.
That's right.
So in total.
Story in the paper today about New York City sinking. We wouldn't want to be sinking here in the Back Bay, which is built, of course, on landfill.
Remember Abby
Not
Hoffman?
landfill. What's it built on?
Wetland.
Wetland, thank you.
No, it's not, actually.
What's it built on?
I don't know. But remember Abby Hoffman said everybody should jump at the same time?
That's